Chapter 1102. Although Li Yi wasn't familiar with this old man called Yang Wanli, and it was their first time meeting, he could almost conclude that he was a very selfish person. What you give, you must want. How selfish must a person be to say something so selfish? His mother had raised him up and sacrificed so much. What was he after? Prime Minister Wang was already so old, yet he gave up the luxurious life in the imperial capital and the high position of Prime Minister, who was below only one person but above tens of thousands of people, and risked his life to follow Yang Luqing around, wholeheartedly assisting her. What was he after? Mississippi Lu, because of the master-disciple relationship, gathered the masters of the Lu Alliance to help her take down 5 cities. What was she after? This old man wasn't only selfish, but also arrogant. He liked to impose his thoughts on others. Yang Liuqing was his martial nephew. He helped his martial nephew take revenge, help his martial nephew fulfill his wish, help his martial nephew plan his life. What was going on? What was going on? Yang Wanli looked at him and said in a low voice, "Since ancient times, there has never been a female emperor." "Forget it." Li Yi interrupted him with a wave of his hand. "Don't think that you can speak irresponsibly just because you're old. Who says that no woman has ever been an emperor since ancient times? Do you not pay any attention to current affairs other than cultivating? Also, even if there isn't a female emperor, why can't she be the first?" "You!" Yang Wanli was speechless at Li Yi's question. He took a deep breath and said, "What if this old man firmly opposes? Then drag him out and bury him." "You won't do that." "I really won't." Li Yi nodded. No matter what, this old man was one of the few relatives of Yang Liuqing. He couldn't really drag him out and bury him. However, he was quite popular in the Wu Kingdom. If he was determined to go against them, there would be some unnecessary trouble. "I can cripple your martial arts, find a courtyard, and let you live out the rest of your life in peace. What do you think of this suggestion?" Li Yi looked at him and asked, "Can you beat our second miss? What about after she becomes the emperor?" Yang Wanli took a deep breath and thought. He looked at him and asked, "Who will she pass the empire to?" "That's her business. Didn't Prime Minister Wang tell you just now?" Li Yi shook his head and said, "Whether it's passed to her son or daughter, that's your Yang family's business. You can pass it to whoever you want, but it won't be passed to my son. It has nothing to do with me." Li Yi knew what old Yang was worried about. He wasn't worried that Yang Liuqing would become the first emperor in the Wu Kingdom or even the world. He was worried that Yang Liuqing would interfere with the Wu Kingdom's imperial power. He had experienced this kind of thing once in the Jing Kingdom. If it weren't for the fact that his family had no interest in being the emperor of the Wu Kingdom would have been his child instead of Yang Liuqing's. Old Yang would have been planted in the ground instead of standing here and talking to him. He had explained everything clearly. He glanced at Yang Wanli, turned around, and walked out of the room. Compared with wasting time here, he wanted to see what was going on with Rui. He was a little confused. He hoped that Rui could make a breakthrough, but he didn't want Rui to make a breakthrough. He hoped that she could realize her wish, but he didn't want to live under her shadow for the rest of his life. If she didn't make a breakthrough, he would have a chance to turn things around. If she made a breakthrough, he could only be suppressed by her for the rest of his life. After a while, Rui had already walked out of the room. Li Yi walked over and asked nervously, "How was it? Did you make a breakthrough?" Mississippi Lu glanced at him and said, "I just had some enlightenment. It's not so easy to break through to the supreme power realm." Li Yi let out a long sigh of relief. Mississippi Lu looked at him and asked, "You seem to be very happy." Li Yi was startled and said, "I'm happy for you that you have a new understanding. But it's fine if you didn't break through. Elder Su said that you broke through by chance. After a while, let's go out and enjoy the scenery. Maybe when the chance comes, you'll naturally break through." Li Yi patted her on the shoulder and said, "Student Rui, keep working hard. I believe that day will come." The appearance of Yang Wanli and Senior Tian was an accident. Under the influence of Su's sloppy charm, the matter was finally settled. Senior Tian leaned against the bed, took Yang Liuqing's hand, and said apologetically, "Miss, I'm sorry." Yang Liuqing smiled, indicating that she did not care. Old Yang changed his clothes. He was not liked by the other 2 Supreme Power Realm Masters and was discussing something with Prime Minister Wang, Wei Liang, and the others. When he saw Li Yi walk into the room, he hurried over and called Yang Liuqing over, as if he was guarding against a thief. In fact, 3 supreme power realm masters were enough to sneak into the imperial palace of the Wu kingdom and use violent means to force the current Emperor Wu to abdicate. However, Senior Tian was seriously injured and her foundation was damaged. She needed a long time to recuperate. Old Su would definitely be by her side, so this plan could not be carried out for the time being. Secondly, Li Yi did not want to do this. Although forcing the Emperor Wu to abdicate could directly achieve their ultimate goal, it would only be a superstructure, and the foundation would not be stable. The Wu kingdom would still be a chaotic Wu kingdom, which was not in line with their original intention. The strategy they adopted was to fight and govern, establish a foothold in the northwest, and expand one state and one city after another. Although this would take some time, after she ascended the throne, the internal strife of the Wu kingdom would also end. With a wave of her hand, it would be a new era of the Empress. She was injured and needs to recuperate. This time, I won't go back with you. Su looked at Senior Tian on the bed, then turned to look at him and said. Li Yi nodded. The Wu kingdom was basically settled. Xuzhou and Rui City had been stable. Su would stay here to take care of Senior Tian and protect Yang Liuqing at the same time, in case old Yang regretted it. Since he had taken the initiative to suggest it, there was no need for him to say it himself. In fact, they did not have anything important to do next. They would probably go sightseeing, travel around various countries, fulfill Rui's Jianghu dream, and accompany Rui and the others. Of course, in the process, whether it was the Qi kingdom or the Jing kingdom, there were still some things that needed to be settled. Of course, these were all things that needed to be planned after they returned to Rui City. Su thought for a while, then looked at him and asked, You are going to the Qi kingdom, right? Li Yi nodded slightly. It was a must to go to the Qi kingdom. The business in the Qi kingdom had been handed over to Miss Lin. Even he himself did not expect that he would be a hands-off boss for 4 years. Every year, the silver shipped from the Qi kingdom accounted for more than 10% of the total income of the mansion. It seemed to be only 10%, but it was already a very terrifying number. In these 4 years, apart from a regular letter, he had no other contact with Miss Lin. In addition, it was time to settle the grudges with the Taoist nun and the holy religion. Su looked at him and said, If there is any news about the Taoist nun, let me know immediately. Su was a very strange person. He had suffered so much in the past, and the main culprit was obviously second-great uncle, but he could not forget the Taoist nun, thinking day and night of teaching her how to be a good person. This was a typical case of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. What Taoist nun? The old woman leaning against the headboard suddenly asked. A female grandmaster. Li Yi thought for a while then said, She is old friends with Su. A female grandmaster? Elder Tian's eyes moved. He looked at Su and asked, If there is any news, I will let you know immediately. Do you really want to see her? Yes. Su nodded, then gritted his teeth and said, Even in my dreams. Li Yi sighed, then turned and walked out of the room. As a single dog who had been single all his life, there were some things that he could not teach him if he did not experience them himself. Today's lesson should be able to let him understand a little. When faced with extreme situations, he should erupt with a strong desire to survive, and not a strong desire to die. Chapter 1103. Su seemed to have understood something. When he walked out of the room, his expression was one of astonishment and contemplation. He looked at Li Yi, who was standing in the courtyard, and asked, Why is she angry? Su's question was very good. Why is she angry? Why is she still angry? Why is she angry again? These were 3 world-class philosophical questions, each more difficult than the last. Countless scholars, ancient and modern, Chinese and foreign, had studied these questions, but none of them had come to a conclusion. This was an unsolvable problem. When she was angry, the only way to survive was through a strong desire to live. Li Yi thought for a moment and said, Never tell a woman that you miss another woman in front of her, even if you don't treat her as a woman, or even as a person. Su was confused. But that damned Taoist nun is my enemy. First of all, she is a woman that you dream of. Li Yi looked at him and said, Other than Elder Tian, the only woman you dream of is your mother. But my mother passed away decades ago. So there are no exceptions. Li Yi felt that he had made it clear enough. If Elder Su still did not understand the deeper meaning behind his words, then he was not prepared to teach him any more. It would be more dignified to talk about a smart, naive, and adorable student like Shou Ning. If he were to talk about a student with such poor comprehension skills, he, the great King Jing, would not be able to bear the embarrassment. Su nodded as if he understood. He asked, "Then why didn't you stop me just now? If I had stopped you, you would never have realized this problem." This actually involved a higher level of knowledge that he did not understand at the moment. In the past few years, Li Yi had used his own experience to explain that the desire to live was not innate. It was a precious experience that he had learned through constant courting death and experiencing many successes and failures. If he was already a king in this aspect, then Elder Su was just a LVL1 rookie. He still had a long way to go in terms of leveling up, and it was bound to be interspersed with countless blood and tears. Su thought for a moment and nodded. He said seriously, "Teach me a little more." In fact, there was no shortcut to this path. Li Yi really didn't know where to start when he asked so bluntly. He thought for a moment and said, "I recommend you a book. You should read it when you have time. The book is called Mandarin Duck Handkerchief. It depicts the psychology of women very deeply and vividly. If you want to conquer women, you must first understand women." He had been a complete stranger to love in the beginning, but in the past few years, he had realized some things through his own experience. The longer time passed, the more he admired the great goddess who wrote the Mandarin Duck Handkerchief. Her knowledge and understanding of the relationship between men and women were so deep that he was convinced. He almost prostrated himself before her. "Mandarin Duck Handkerchief?" Su nodded and asked, "Where can I buy it?" This was the key question. Mandarin Duck Handkerchief could only be found in the Jing Kingdom, and it was also copied among women. It was forbidden to be sold on the market. She only knew Mississippi Lu had it. She would ask for him later. "I'll ask for you later." Li Yi thought of something and asked, "You said that Rui needs a chance to break through to the Supreme Power Realm. What is a chance?" He still hoped that Rui could achieve her wish. Even if he would be under her for the rest of his life, he did not care. It did not matter to him whether he was on top or below, as long as she liked it. Su looked out of the courtyard wall and said, "Between life and death, love and hatred." Li Yi looked at him and asked, "Which one do you belong to?" "Back then, I was high-spirited and vigorous. I roamed the Jianghu and helped the weak. I made many enemies. One time, I was chased by my enemies and my life was hanging by a thread. Only then did I comprehend the great path of a grandmaster. One aperture after another, I turned defeat into victory and killed all my enemies with my sword." Su said it casually, but Li Yi heard the thrill in it. People's potential was forced out. Between life and death, one could realize the slim chance of survival and break through the shackles of martial arts. It sounded like it. But how many people in the Wu Kingdom and how many Supreme Power Realm Masters were there? The old lady lying on the bed must belong to the second kind. Yang Wanli did not know, but he was the first kind. There were so many people who practiced martial arts in the Wu Kingdom, but there were only 2 people who broke through to the Supreme Power Realm between life and death. What about the others? Those who did not break through were all dead. Li Yi did not want Rui to choose the first way. If something happened to her, who could he find a sister-in-law who could cook so well? He looked at Su and asked, "What does love and hatred mean?" "Separation in life and death, great joy and great sorrow, and great ups and downs." Great joy and sorrow, and great ups and downs, belong to emotions. It was not difficult to understand. It was similar to turning sorrow and anger into strength, or suddenly exploding in a small universe. Taoist nun belonged to this kind. Her whole family was slaughtered, so she became a young supreme power. But there was also a risk. If after great joy and sorrow, she did not break through to the supreme power realm, but had a cerebral hemorrhage and epilepsy, it would not be worth it. He frowned slightly and asked, "Is there no other gentler way?" "That depends on your luck." Su shook his head and said, "Yang Wanli became a supreme power after a night's sleep. As far as I know, your wife did not spend much effort to become a supreme power. Changda was born with a disability, so he is different from normal people like us. We can't compare him. That ox nose in your Jing kingdom is famous all the time, but he is only a supreme power." Li looked at him and asked, "After saying so much, if you want to become a supreme power," Su nodded and said, "It still depends on your luck." After saying so much, they went back to the topic of luck. Li Yi planned to borrow books from Mississippi Lu first. When it came to martial arts, it was better to let nature take its course. Life and death, and great ups and downs, it was better for her to treat him better. She would rub his shoulders and cook his noodles. Maybe she could share some of his transmigrator halo with her, and he would become a supreme power after a night's sleep. Rui never hid her knowledge in martial arts. When Li Yi walked into her room, she was teaching by Su and Yang Liuqing. No wonder their martial arts improved so quickly. Rui always gave them special lessons, helping them step by step and teaching them personally. It would be strange if he could leave them behind. He walked to the bedside and said, "Rui, lend me the book under your pillow." Mississippi Lu was busy. She looked up and asked casually, "What book?" "The Mandarin Duck Handkerchief." Li Yi lifted her pillow and said, "The one you made notes on, the one you wrote a lot of thoughts in." Where did it go?" Mississippi Lu stood up abruptly and looked at him with a face full of shame and anger. "You went through my stuff? I accidentally saw it once. What are you so nervous about?" Li Yi glanced at her and said, "It's not me who wants it, it's Su who wants to read it. You can lend it to him. When Elder Tian recovers, he can provide you with another grandmaster to practice with." "I threw it away." Mississippi Lu glared at him, the anger in her eyes still lingering. "Threw it away?" Li Yi shook his head. "It would be a waste to throw it away." She looked at Yang Liuqing and asked, "Do you have this book?" Yang Liuqing's face turned red. She would not lie. It seemed that she did have it. Li Yi was about to ask again, but she lowered her head and said softly, "I left it in Rui City. I didn't bring it." Li Yi looked at Bai Su. Bai Su took out a thin book from her sleeve and threw it to him. She said lightly, "Remember to return it to me after reading it." The white heroine was indeed forthright. Li Yi handed the book to Elder Su and told him to keep it safe. After he finished reading it, he realized a problem. The Mandarin Duck Handkerchief was the ancient version of the 36 stratagems for catching a man. It taught women how to pick up men. Why did Bai Su read this kind of book? Did she also want to understand women's minds? It was unnecessary. Chapter 1104. After careful calculation, Li Yi and Rui had been in Songzhou for a long time. They came here 2 months before the Spring Festival and went back to Rui City for the New Year. Just after the Lantern Festival, they came to Songzhou again. Previously, he was worried that Yang Liuqing and the others would not be able to carry out all aspects of work smoothly after they took over Songzhou. After such a long time of learning, she had a clear understanding of the revolutionary routine. Since she could be a good leader, Li Yi had nothing to worry about. With old Yang and Su watching over her, Li Yi no longer had any concerns about her safety. After staying in Songzhou for a few more days, it was the day of departure that Li Yi and Rui had discussed. Zue Mo and Li Mu were still waiting for them in Rui City, so it was not good for them to stay in Songzhou for a long time. Moreover, the Wu Kingdom's worries were gone, and there would not be any problems in the following development. Li Yi had no reason to stay here. "Senior sister, goodbye." Li Duan sat in the carriage, lifted the curtain, and waved at Yang Liuqing vigorously. Yang Liuqing was his senior sister in name, but in fact, she was half his master. Rui only spanked him when he was disobedient, and the usual teaching was done by Yang Liuqing. Rui and Ruoqing got on the carriage, and Mississippi Lu, Bai Su, and Yang Liuqing talked. Bai Su was not the #1 master under Mississippi Lu, but she did grow the fastest. Whether it was martial arts or broad-mindedness, she was deeply trusted by Mississippi Lu. It was not too much to call Bai Su her right-hand man. Senior Tian still needed a long time to recuperate, but small-scale activities were not a problem. She stood with Su and saw them off. "I'll look for you after she recovers." Su took a few steps forward and said. Then he lowered his voice so that only he and Li Yi could hear and whispered, "If there's any news about Taoist Nun, send me a letter immediately." Actually, he did not have to speak so softly. Senior Tian's body had not yet recovered, so he could not hear what he said. Li Yi looked at him and said, "Before I leave, I want to teach you one last principle." Su nodded and pretended to listen attentively. Whatever Li Yi taught him, he followed it as a philosophy of life. Never trust others unconditionally. A smile appeared on Li Yi's face as he said, "Except for yourself." A puzzled look appeared on Su's face. "What do you mean?" Li Yi patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't worry. If there's any news about Taoist nun, I'll send you a letter immediately." Li Yi did not deliberately lower his voice, so it was clear. When he felt a sharp gaze behind him, which made his back feel a little cold, Su finally understood what Li Yi wanted to teach him. He narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. "I'll remember it." When Li Yi turned around and was about to leave, he clearly saw that the old man named Yang Wanli let out a sigh of relief. He wanted to tell him that he was thinking too much and that he had no interest in the Yang family's Wu kingdom at all. But after thinking about it, he gave up. He liked to guess, so let him keep guessing. He waved to the crowd, and when he turned around again, a voice came from behind him. "Uncle." He turned around and saw Yang Liuqing coming over. Yang Liuqing walked to Li Yi's side, looked at him and asked, "Uncle, I don't know when we can meet again after this farewell. Can I hug you?" Not far behind her, Yang Wanli's body stiffened and his face changed greatly. Li Yi was also taken aback. Then he smiled and opened his arms. Yang Luqing paused for a moment, then took a step forward and gave him a light hug. They separated as soon as they touched. A smile bloomed on her face as she waved her hand. "Martial aunt, goodbye." "Goodbye." Li Yi waved and got on the carriage. Bai Su walked out from behind Yang Liuqing and looked at her with a hint of teasing on her face. She said, "Our otherworldly empress, which man do you want to deal with that Mandarin duck handkerchief?" She whispered in her ear and walked to the carriage with her hands behind her back. Then she turned around and waved. "Let's go." The group of carriages moved further and further away. Yang Wanli's face was as black as charcoal. "Su Tian, come in with me." Senior Tian looked at Su Tian, then turned around and walked back to his room. "Little brat." Su sighed softly and followed in with his head lowered. Yang Liuqing watched the carriages go away. After a long time, she let out a sigh of relief. When she turned around, her aura was completely different. She looked at Wei Liang and Chen Qing standing behind her and said, "Send a letter to the provincial governors of Su Prefecture and Chen Prefecture. I will only give them 3 days to consider. If they don't surrender in 3 days, they won't have the chance to surrender anymore." Wei Liang knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. "Understood." It had been a few days since Li Yi returned to Rui City. Rui, Zuamo, and even his godmother felt that Songzhou was a place of slaughter. Countless souls had died on the battlefield, so they didn't want Li Mu and Yongning to stay there for long. After not seeing him for a few months, little Li Mu really missed him. She even wanted to sleep with him. It was said that daughters and fathers were close, and this was true. This matter made Zuamo very jealous. After all, she was the one who gave birth to Li Mu and had always been by her side. Seeing how close she was to Li Yi, she could only call her little heartless. Li Mu, who was about to be 1 year old, could already say words like father and mother. Under Zuamo's guidance, she could also say some other words. The rest of the credit belonged to Yongning, who watched her and talked to her all day. At 11 years old, Yongning no longer looked like the little girl with dementia 5 or 6 years ago. When Li Yi first saw Xiaoning, she was probably her age. She was his aunt and also the king of the children in the family. The person Li Duan admired the most was her because her martial arts were better than Li Duan's, and she would play with him. There were no peers around him, and the one who was the youngest than him was his aunt. Li Duan was talking to Li Mu at the side. "Xiao Mu, when you are a little older, brother can play with you. You have to grow up quickly. When you grow up, Xiao Nyang will come to see you." Li Mu giggled. Xiao Nyang." Li Yi sat in the yard, drinking the grape wine that Xiao Zhu had made for a long time. Unfortunately, there was no one to drink with him. Fong could barely be considered half a companion, but he was busy with other things these days. He was about to go on a long journey, and he didn't know how long he would be gone this time. Naturally, there were a lot of things to prepare. Rui was also very busy recently. Before she left, she needed to pick some people to go with her, and the matters in the league had to be arranged properly. Bai Su also liked to drink, and as her chest became more and more erect, her attitude towards him became better and better. Unfortunately, she followed behind Mississippi Lu all day long, and Li Yi really couldn't find anyone for a while. He sighed and raised the wine cup. Halfway through, he suddenly put it down and lightly slapped his palm behind him. The two palms collided, and Li Yi felt as if his palm had fallen into a ball of cotton, unable to advance or retreat. In just an instant he understood two things. First, the other party had no ill intentions. Second, the other party's strength was far superior to his, and it could even be said to be heaven and earth apart. A sinister voice came from behind him. "Not bad, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you haven't slacked off in martial arts." The voice was very familiar, but he hadn't heard it for a few years. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and the next moment, a smile appeared on his face. He looked at Fong, who had just walked into the yard, and laughed loudly. "Bring the wine, the strongest kind." Chapter 11:05. Chong was a man who always spoke in a gloomy way and had a deadpan face, which made him very unpopular. His name was enough to make countless officials and nobles in the capital tremble with fear. Ordinary people might not have heard of Manager Chong, but in the rich and powerful families, his name could stop children from crying at night. Li Yi had never felt so close to this deadpan face as he did now. Fong brought the strongest wine in the mansion. It was not the kind of wine that was distilled by industrial distillation. It was the first batch of wine officially brewed after the improvement of the process. "I've been to a lot of places and drunk a lot of wine in the past few years. Your wine is the best to my taste." No wonder His Majesty couldn't forget it. Chong didn't drink like Fong and the others, who drank with their heads raised. After drinking, a small part of the wine was spilled on his neck and body. He drank cup by cup, and sometimes he savored it carefully. He didn't waste a drop. He had followed the former emperor for most of his life, so he always talked about him. After drinking a few cups, Li Yi slowed down and asked, "Where have you been these years?" Chong refilled his cup and said, "Everywhere north and south of the Yangtze River. His Majesty had a wish when he was alive. He wanted to go to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom. His Majesty is gone, so only I can fulfill his wish." The former emperor once said that he wanted to go to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom. So Chang's footprints had been to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom. With such a loyal servant, the former emperor's spirit in heaven should be very happy. Li Yi took a sip of wine and asked, "What's your plan next?" "The world is so big, but this is the only place that is interesting. I plan to stay here and teach a few disciples. I'll enjoy a few years of peace and happiness. What do you think, Your Highness King Jing?" What was there to think about? Li Yi agreed with both hands and feet. Chong was a guru and one of the best among the gurus. He was as rare as the feathers of a phoenix or the horns of a qilin. Compared to a guru, the national first-class protected animals paled in comparison. Once old Tian recovered from his injuries, and with the addition of Su, Li Yi counted with his fingers, it would be incredible. If he could also capture old Taoist Yuan, their family would have the 5 unparalleled masters. This was not even considering second great-uncle or Rui, who was half a step into grandmaster. In the future, we can turn Rui City into a retirement home for the grandmasters. High benefits and pensions will provide a strong guarantee for these lonely old heroes in their later years. We welcome all the grandmasters to settle down here. Grandpa Chong. Yong Ning ran over from afar with a smile on her face. Her voice was crisp and filled with joy. Your Highness Yong Ning. Chongda looked at her and revealed a rare smile. Your Highness has grown so tall in just a few years. Li Duan followed behind Yong Ning. He had seen Chong when he was young. However, he was too young at that time and probably did not have much of a memory of him now. He looked at him curiously. This is your duenna, isn't it? Chongda grabbed his arm and squeezed it. He nodded and said, His foundation is not bad. He's a good seedling for martial arts. He extended his hand and searched Li Duan's body from head to toe. When his hand reached his crotch, Li Duan finally could not help but run away. He hid behind Yong Ning and looked at Chongda with fear in his eyes. Not bad, not bad. Chong repeated the word, not bad, a few times. This was extremely rare. Dragons would give birth to dragons and phoenixes would give birth to phoenixes. Rui had broken through to Grandmaster at a young age. Naturally, her son would not be bad either. Su had also said that his son's foundation was very good and much better than his father's. During this period, under the awe of Mississippi Lu, he had been exceptionally diligent in his cultivation. Rui and Su would often give him pointers. There was no shortage of grandmasters around him. His future achievements would not be too low. Chong looked at him and said, I have never accepted a disciple in my life. I don't want my martial arts to be lost. Your son has a good aptitude. It won't be a disgrace to my name if I accept him as my disciple. What do you think? It was naturally good to have a grandmaster as a disciple. However, Su had also expressed the intention to accept Li Duan as a disciple when he was a little older. Li Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, Master, I don't need to purify my body, right? Li Duan tugged at Yong Ning's sleeve curiously and asked, Little aunt, what is purifying my body? Yong Ning shook her head and said, I don't know either. Li Yi carried Li Duan over and whispered something in his ear. Li Duan's eyes widened. He jumped down from his legs and ran outside quickly. He was a man. Only those with a small penis were men. He did not want to cut it off. Even if this old man was very powerful, even if he was more powerful than his aunt, he would not cut it off. Li Yi watched him run out and said, Su has the same idea. Let's wait for Li Duan to grow up a little. That Su guy? Chong frowned and said, That Su guy's martial arts are lousy. How can he be compared to me? Li Yi knew about the grudge between Su and Chong. A few years ago, he had personally witnessed the battle that involved a man's pride. That battle ended in a draw. Since then, Su had been looking for trouble at second great-uncle's place every day. He was no longer the Su Tian from 3 years ago. Chong had been touring the world these few years. He did not know if he had achieved a breakthrough. He did not have the heart to tell Chong that Su was different from him now. He was old and had a sunset glow. When Elder Tian recovered, the two grandmasters would join forces and teach him a lesson in a matter of minutes. If old Yang's love-hate gay friend was added to the equation, Chang's chances of winning were close to zero. Chong Da looked at Yong Ning, who was chasing after Li Duan, and nodded. He said, You have taken good care of Her Highness Yong Ning these few years. You did not let His Majesty down. Li Yi cupped his hands. It's my duty. But what about Her Highness Emingzu and Shaoning? Chong Da changed the topic. He furrowed his brows and asked, You left them in the capital for many years while you enjoyed yourself here. What did you promise His Majesty back then? Li Yi opened his mouth. This was a question that could not be answered in a few words. He paused, then said, That's why I said that Li Xian is really not a good person. The previous emperor passed the throne to him, but he left everything to Emingzu. Is there any emperor like this? You were the one who promised the previous emperor. Come, let's drink. Don't change the topic. Let's get drunk. It had been a long time since Li Yi had gotten drunk. Under Chang's questioning, he held the jar of wine and gulped down a few mouthfuls. He immediately became drunk. My head is so dizzy. He shook his head and stood up. He waved his hand toward the other side of the courtyard and said, Xiaofan, help me to rest. The servant girl quickly ran over and put Li Yi's arm on her shoulder. She helped him walk into the room. Li Yi was really drunk. He took off his shoes, laid on the bed with his clothes on, and quickly fell asleep. Xiao Huan fetched some hot water, wetted the cloth, and wrung it dry. She carefully wiped his face and palm. She had done this action countless times and could control her strength very well. Even in his sleep, a comfortable expression appeared on Li Yi's face. After she finished wiping Li Yi's face and palm, she put the cloth back into the basin, covered him with the blanket, and quietly left. When she reached the door, she turned her head back and looked at the figure lying on the bed. Her gaze was somewhat confused and dim. After a long time, she turned and left, leaving behind only a faint sigh. Chapter 1106. The difference between a good wine and a bad wine was the taste and the headache after a hangover. The wine he drank with Chong yesterday was his treasure. He didn't even want to let Xiao Zhu experiment with it. When he woke up in the morning, he only had a slight headache. Xiao Huan wet the towel and walked over to help him wipe his face. Li Yi took the towel from her hand and said, I'll do it myself. He wiped his face. Xiao Huan took the towel from his hand and put it back in the basin. She turned and walked out. When he put on his clothes and got out of bed, he felt that something was wrong. It wasn't the first time he had this feeling. Ever since he came back from Cangzhou, he felt that something was different. But when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember what it was. He sat at the table and frowned. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. He woke up late this morning. Rui and the others had already finished breakfast. Xiao Huan brought the heated food in, put it on the table and walked out. Li Yi picked up the chopsticks. Halfway through, his expression froze. He knew where the difference came from. Quiet. Too quiet. In the past, when he woke up, Xiaofan would stand by the bed and hand him a towel. When he wiped his face, she would tell him about the new things that happened between the maids and the fu. When he ate, Xiaofan would sit beside him or across from him. She would hold her chin with one hand or both hands and watch him eat in a daze. When he found out, she would smile foolishly and her eyes curved into crescent moons. When he was writing in the study, she stood by the side to grind the ink. After she was done, she walked behind him, put her hands behind her back, and tiptoed to see what he was writing, even though she didn't recognize many of the words. Not anymore. She would still hand him a hot towel in the morning, but she wouldn't sit across from him when he ate. When he was in the study, she would grind the ink and leave by herself for fear of disturbing him. Several times, Li Yi saw her sitting alone in the courtyard in a daze. Xiaofan used to be in a daze, but it was rare for her to be in a daze for several hours like recently. Li Yi felt a little guilty. Ever since he arrived in Xuzhou 3 years ago, he had been tossing and turning in the chaotic land and the Wu kingdom. He rarely had any free time. She loved to listen to him tell stories. How long had it been since he last sat in the courtyard and let her massage his shoulders while he told her a story? It was so long ago that he could no longer remember it clearly. Xiao Huan's significance to him was irreplaceable. Xiao Chui could not. Xiao Zhu could not. Even Rui and Rui could not. When he first came to this world, when he was at his most hesitant and helpless, the one who was always by his side was actually not Rui, nor was it Rui. The Xiao Huan at that time was still a silly and adorable little maid, only knew how to circle around him, liked to listen to his stories, liked to eat the food he cooked. She was always chattering and seemed to have endless things to say. When did she become so reticent? Rui walked in from outside and sat beside him. She said softly, "Hubby." Li Yi raised his head. She looked over and asked, "Hubby, do you know what day it is tomorrow?" March 21st. March 21st was not his and Rui's wedding anniversary, nor was it Rui's birthday, nor was it Rui's birthday. March 21st was Xiao Huan's birthday. Li Yi's face was full of regret. If it wasn't for Rui's reminder, he actually forgot about Xiao Huan's birthday. Rui saw the expression on his face and knew that he had remembered. She looked at him and said softly, "After this birthday, Xiao Huan will be 20 years old." Li Yi sighed softly, "Little maid has grown up." Xiao Huan is concubine's Tongfang maid. Concubine knows hubby felt that Xiao Huan was too young, but after today, she will be 20 years old. If a Tongfang maid is not a Tongfang maid, she will be an ordinary maid. Others might not dare to say it openly, but what would they think of her? Rui looked at him, shook her head and said, "These things, Xiao Huan will not tell hubby, hubby yourself will not think of it." Li Yi's eyes were slightly dazed. In his memory, the little maid was always that little maid with 2 buns or a bun on her head, swaying around in front of him. He did not realize that Li Duan was already 4 years old. Yong Ning had already grown into a young lady. In a few more months, even if it was measured by the future generation's standards, Shaoning would be considered an adult. Little maid actually was not a little maid for a long time. Xiao Chui had just coaxed Li Mu to sleep and walked back to the courtyard that belonged to her, Xiao Zhu and Xiao Huan. Xiao Zhu was packing things in the room. She walked in to take a look and came out again. She asked Xiao Huan, who was sitting in the courtyard in confusion, "Xiao Huan, we will be leaving in a few days. Why haven't you packed yet? What are you doing here, eating melon seeds?" "Young master likes to eat, but he doesn't like to eat. I am peeling some for young master." Xiao Huan turned around and smiled. "You guys pack first, I have nothing to pack, I will be done an hour before we leave." Xiao Chui looked at the bowl of melon seeds in front of her and her scratched fingers. She grabbed Xiao Chui's hand and said angrily, "Are you stupid? Your hand is already like this. Why are you still peeling?" Xiao Huan pulled her hand back, her eyes curved, smiled and said, "It's okay. You." Although Xiao Huan was usually so gentle, but when it came to things, Xiao Chui could never be stubborn. She went back to the room angrily, looked outside and said discontentedly, "You say, why is this girl so stubborn?" Xiao Zhu came over, sighed and said, "She is stubborn for a long time. Instead of worrying about Xiao Huan, it is better to worry about ourselves. Xiao Huan is much luckier than us." "Did you guys hear Prince and Princess are going out again?" I heard from Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui. This time they will be out for a long time. I really envy Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui. They follow second madam and third madam. They bring them everywhere. They are the servant girls of second madam and third madam. They will serve them in bed in the future. They are not the same as us. That is not necessarily true. Look at Sister Xiao Huan. She is the princess's servant girl. She has been with Prince for a long time. She has not been taken in as a concubine yet. You guys guess. Could it be that Prince does not like her? I think it is possible. Xiao Huan is not like Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui. She looks silly. How could Prince like her? Olive. You shut up. There was Jiang of Silla in the capital, Jiang of Silla in Rui City, and Jiang of Silla in Shu province. When he left the capital, he left some servant girls to look after the house, took some with him, and left some in Shu province. In Rui City, the servant girls in the house, only a few had been by his side since he was in the capital. The rest were new recruits. The one who spoke harshly at this time was a servant girl called Xiao Qing. When she was in the capital, she worked in the prince's house, and in this Rui City, she was also the head servant of the house, a small housekeeper. Among the servant girls, her position was only below that of Xiao Huan and the other two. At this moment, her face was full of anger. Looking at the two chatting servant girls, she said angrily, "What have I usually taught you? Is this something you can say?" Perhaps it was because Xiao Qing's usual amiable image had been deeply ingrained in people's hearts. One of the servant girls pouted and said, "Sister Xiao Qing, we are not wrong. That's right, that Xiao Huan looks silly." The other person also chimed in. "You." Xiao Qing raised her eyebrows and was about to reprimand, but suddenly looked behind the crowd, bowed and said, "Prince." Li Yi looked indifferently at the two servant girls in the crowd, waved his hand and said, "Pack your things today, go back to where you came from." The two of them paled and knelt on the ground with a thud. "Prince," Li Yi waved his hand. "Let's go before I change my mind." Hearing this, the two of them trembled and broke out in a cold sweat, immediately got up and left in a hurry. The other servant girls' faces were also slightly pale. They knew that when Prince said that he did not change his mind, he did not mean that he would forgive them. Criticizing behind their backs was a big taboo for them as servants. In those big clans, it was a taboo. No one expected that Prince, who was usually amiable and did not speak harshly to anyone, would be so angry just because they said a few bad words about Miss Xiao Huan. Li Yi glanced at the maidservants. Although his gaze was gentle, everyone shuddered when they thought of the two sentences he had said in such a calm manner. Third year of Jingping, 21st of March. This was a very ordinary day. Li Yi sat in the study, looking at a map of the Qi kingdom. Xiao Huan pushed the door open and came in, placed a small bag on the table and said softly, "Young master, I peeled some melon seeds. There is no skin. You should eat it soon. It will not taste good after a long time." "Okay." Li Yi nodded. "Young master, remember to eat. I will go down first." Xiao Huan smiled sweetly, turned around, a trace of undetectable disappointment appearing on her face. This trace of disappointment quickly turned into a smile. She sniffed and walked out of the study. She only took one step, and then she could not take another step, because Li Yi grabbed her hand. Chapter 1107. Son-in-law. Her small hand was held tightly by a big hand. Xiao Huan's body trembled. She turned around and looked at him in a daze. In the past at Willow Leaf Village, when they went up the mountain to pick wild vegetables, hunt rabbits, catch pheasants, when she could not walk down the mountain, son-in-law would carry her on his back. When she fell asleep listening to stories, son-in-law would carry her back to their room to sleep. Son-in-law had not held her hand for a very, very long time. Li Yi looked at her hand. The originally slender and white fingers had many scratches. The smooth nails also had many small nicks from wear and tear. Li Yi used both hands to hold her hand, softly said, "Why are you so silly?" Her eyes curved again. Two dimples appeared at the corner of her mouth, softly said, "Son-in-law, Xiao Huan is not silly, Xiao Huan is willing." Li Yi pulled her over, let her sit on his lap, embraced her, softly said, "It is all son-in-law's fault." A little panic appeared on Xiao Huan's face, quickly said, "Son-in-law treats Xiao Huan the best." Even Li Yi himself felt that he was not a good person. He had neglected her during this period of time. She was still defending him at this time, and even said that she was not silly. Li Yi scratched her nose, said, "Let's go, son-in-law will cook longevity noodles for you." A bright light suddenly flashed in Xiao Huan's bright big eyes, then her nose turned sour. "Son-in-law still remembers. Let's go." Li Yi held her hand, walked towards the small kitchen. A very, very long time ago, the family of four in Willow Leaf Village, when he was not the county lieutenant, not the county marquis, not the golden Ziguang Lu Dafu, And not the Jiang of Silla, the things he had to do every day, was nothing more than teaching, cooking, teasing the little servant girls. At that time he was not that familiar with Rui, nor was he that familiar with Rui. The only person he could talk to every day was Xiaofan. She would be with a group of naughty children and listen to his story of the 36 white-boned spirits. After school, she would help him wash and cut vegetables. Even if she could not do anything, she would wander around and listen to his stories of strange things. The cooking method of longevity noodles was very simple. There were noodles, vegetables, and eggs. What Xiaohuan could do was to light the fire. Her favorite thing to do was to light the fire. She sat by the stove and poked her head out to take a look. She said, "Young master, 1 egg is enough. I can't eat 2. There's no reason to put only 1 egg in the longevity noodles. You have to put 2, not 1 more, not 1 less." Li Yi didn't look back and continued to work. A look of interest appeared on the maid's pretty face as she asked, "Son-in-law, why is that?" Li Yi explained, "There's a reason for this. 2 eggs means good things come in pairs." A look of worship appeared in the maidservant's eyes again. Son-in-law really knows a lot. Xiaohuan's daily worship of him should have started from the time in Willow Leaf Village. The strange things she heard from him every day had slowly accumulated. Time seemed to have turned back to 6 or 7 years ago. That was a kitchen that was even smaller and more dilapidated than this one. When Li Yi recalled it now, the hesitation and confusion he felt when he first came to this world was probably in that small place. In the chatter and surprise of the maidservant, it slowly disappeared. Today's moonlight was still considered bright. There were many lanterns hanging in the courtyard, so it didn't seem very dark. Li Yi and Xiaohuan sat in the courtyard. In front of her, there was a small bowl of longevity noodles that was still steaming. Xiaohuan picked up the chopsticks, thought for a moment and put them down. She quickly ran into the kitchen and brought another bowl. Seeing that she was about to divide the noodles in the bowl, Li Yi hurriedly stopped her. Longevity noodles cannot be divided. If it is divided, it won't have longevity. Xiaohuan shook her head and said, "There's no meaning in Xiaohuan having longevity alone. Xiaohuan wants to have longevity together with son-in-law." On certain matters, if Xiaohuan was stubborn, even Li Yi couldn't persuade her. He no longer insisted. Xiaohuan divided half of the noodles and gave him a poached egg. A bowl of noodles was not much to begin with. To Li Yi, it was only a matter of 2 or 3 mouthfuls. But she ate very slowly. Every mouthful was chewed carefully. A smile appeared on Li Yi's face. He asked, "How's the taste?" She nodded and said, "As long as it's son-in-law's cooking, it's delicious." Only Xiaohuan thought so. What kind of flour could he cook with a bowl of ordinary longevity noodles? Perhaps it was even slightly inferior to the current Rui. Pah! Li Yi watched her eating the noodles. In the dark night, a streak of fire suddenly streaked across the night sky and then exploded. Fireworks and silver flowers turned into the stars in the sky. Xiaohuan was startled. She put down the bowl and turned her head. After a moment of daze, she pointed to the distant sky and said happily, son-in-law, son-in-law, look, someone is setting off fireworks." Xiaohuan was very happy. Rui was in the mountains. Because of fear of mountain fires, fireworks were forbidden even during the New Year. This was the first time she saw fireworks here. Following the first explosion, streaks of fire shot into the sky and lit up the entire Rui as if it was daytime. Setting off fireworks in the mountains had a certain safety hazard. For this fireworks display, Li Yi specially cleared a square. In these few years, the Jing Kingdom's research on gunpowder had made great progress. Fireworks and firecrackers were also used in many different ways. From Li Yi's point of view, as the flames flickered, the little servant girl was in the depths of the smoke. The flickering smoke made her pretty face look even more delicate and beautiful. This was the first time fireworks were set off on a large scale in Rui City. Countless people walked out of their homes and went to their courtyards and streets to look at the night sky in the distance. After a brief daze, they began to cheer and shout. The entire Rui City was in an uproar at this moment. The fireworks lasted for a full quarter of an hour before gradually dying out. In the night sky, only the 4 words, happiness, longevity, health and peace were left, lingering for a long time. Xiaohuan looked at the 4 words. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Looking at Li Yi, her eyes were moist and her lips parted. "Son-in-law, Li Yi walked over and helped her wipe the tears off her face. He smiled and said, "Don't cry, everyone is waiting for you." "Everyone." Rui and Rui walked in from outside the courtyard. Rui hugged her and patted her head. "Our Xiaofan has grown up." Mississippi Lu gave her a sword. It was custom-made for her and had her name on it. Everyone in the Li family practiced martial arts. Xiaofan was no exception. With so many experts teaching her, she might look weak, but she could beat Li Xian's lousy martial arts. Xiao Cui and Xiao Zhu also sent gifts. The three of them were as close as sisters. Naturally, they couldn't be left out. Even Li Duan had a gift. It was a small person that he had carved with a knife. Although it couldn't be seen that it was a small person, it was still a token of his heart. The people in and out of Rui City might not know whose birthday was on the 21st of March, but they would always remember this day. Because every year on the 21st of March, there would be a grand fireworks display in Rui City. Imperceptibly, it had become a tradition in Rui City. That night, they played very late in the room. When Xiao Zhu and Xiao Cui left, Xiao Huan had already fallen asleep on the table. Li Yi walked into the room and gently carried her. When he walked to the bedside, before he put her down, he saw the little servant girl's eyelashes tremble slightly. Li Yi didn't put her down. He sat on the bedside with her in his arms. He lowered his head to look at her. After a long time, he moved closer to her ear and whispered, "If you don't wake up, I'm going to leave." Xiao Huan's eyes opened immediately. Her face was red. She whispered, "Son-in-law." Li Yi hugged her tightly. Xiao Huan said in an even lower voice, "Son-in-law, can you stay a little longer?" Li Yi kissed her forehead gently. He whispered, "I won't leave today." He felt the body in his arms tremble. Xiao Huan raised her head to look at him, her eyes quickly filled with tears. She hugged Li Yi tightly and leaned her head on his shoulder. She sobbed, "Son-in-law, Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan has waited for you for a long time." Chapter 1108. Did you see it last night? That firework was so beautiful. What firework? I went to bed early last night. I don't know. That's a pity. The firework last night lasted for more than a quarter of an hour. There were even words in the sky at the end. Anyway, I've never seen such fireworks in my life. Wait. Who dares to set off fireworks in the city? Aren't they afraid of being locked up in a small dark room? Who dares to lock the prince in a small dark room? I heard that those words were something like, "Fu Shou." I don't know whose birthday it was yesterday. It's too extravagant. Early in the morning, in the city of Rui, people were talking non-stop. Most of the topics were about the fireworks show last night. In the small courtyard, Xiao Zhu finished washing up. When she was about to pour water, she looked at Xiao Cui, who was brushing her teeth with green salt. She wondered, strange, why is Xiao Huan not up today? Isn't she usually the most diligent? Xiao Cui said vaguely while brushing her teeth, "I don't know. Maybe she was too tired last night." This silly girl. She thought that young master had forgotten about her. Xiao Zhu shook her head. Her face was filled with envy. She said, "The fireworks last night were so beautiful." Creak, behind the two of them, a door opened and Xiao Huan walked out. "Hey Xiao Huan, you." Clang. Xiao Zhu didn't have time to pour away the washing water. The basin and water fell to the ground, making a clear sound. Her feet were wet but she was oblivious, her eyes staring at Xiao Huan, or more accurately, staring at her hair that was coiled up high. Xiao Cui also stared at her in a daze. The toothbrush in her hand had already fallen to the ground. Her arms were still moving back and forth. There was a kind of sadness in this world. It was cold when you still had two buns. Your sisters who were younger than you already had their hair coiled up. They had been left far behind by their peers and then mercilessly abandoned. They suddenly felt a little sad. Xiao Zhu picked up the copper basin. Xiao Cui picked up the toothbrush and silently walked back to the room. Xiao Huan looked at them, blushing. She whispered, "You. Fourth madam, let us be quiet." The two turned around and said in unison. Li Duan, who was only 4 years old, still didn't understand some things. For example, he couldn't understand why he had to call Aunt Zumo and Ruoqing Aunt at first, but later on, he had to call them mother. He also couldn't understand why Aunt Ruoqing had to call them mother in the future. If he didn't understand, he would ask. That was why he came to ask Li Yi. This. Li Yi thought for a moment, patted his head, and said, "Children should be obedient, don't ask so many questions." A child's curiosity was very strong. Li Yi's answer obviously did not satisfy Li Duan. He thought for a moment, and his eyes turned. Suddenly he said, "Father, I know. Is it true that we call them auntie first, then mother?" Li Yi nodded. Li Duan would understand these things in the future. As long as he answered him perfunctorily now, it would be fine if he didn't run over and ask questions. "Then when should I call auntie mother?" Li Duan's face revealed a look of anticipation. He asked, "If auntie becomes mother, will she still spank me?" If auntie became mother, would she still spank him? Even Li Yi himself didn't have that confidence. Li Yi looked at him and said seriously, "You can't call her that. If you do, auntie will spank you until your butt blossoms." Li Duan didn't dare to ask any more. He ran out of the courtyard, planning to ask auntie. Auntie treated him the best. She wouldn't lie to him, and she even brought him out to play and gave him delicious food. Other than his parents, grandmother, and Xiao Nyang, auntie was the person who treated him the best. He ran into a small courtyard and saw a white-haired old man standing in the courtyard. His expression changed, and he ran out quickly. He was only halfway when he was picked up. Changde looked at him and said with a smile, "Little guy, your father couldn't escape from me back then. Be a good boy and learn from me. My kung fu is much better than that Su guy." Li Duan kept struggling in the air and shouted, "I won't cut it, I won't cut it, I won't learn your kung fu." Chang insisted on taking Li Duan as his disciple, and Li Yi didn't stop him. It was his good fortune to have a grandmaster willing to pass on his lifelong knowledge to him. Anyway, Chang didn't understand the Wuxia swordplay and the sunflower manual. Li Duan was the young master of the Li family, and he would have to bear many responsibilities in the future. Before that, he must first have a strong body. Xiao Huan, who had already tied up her hair, was teasing Li Mu. Compared to yesterday, although her identity and status had changed, but why did it look like? It was just a change of hairstyle. She didn't let Li Yi arrange a maid for her, and still helped him wash and live every day. Although the chatterbox Xiao Huan of the past had disappeared from his memory forever, there was always a smile on her face, and she didn't stare blankly for a whole day like before. The little maid had grown up, and some memories were probably completely sealed in his mind. People had to grow up. This was inevitable. These years, he had seen Xiao Huan, Shaoning, Yongning, Li Duan, and even Rui grow up. Even Li Yi himself, whether in appearance or mentality, had changed a lot. Many things had changed. The simple and honest Feng Laosen had left, and Rui hadn't changed in these years. Drunk Mo and Ruoqing had come to his side, and even the otherworldly Mississippi Lu had learned to cook. Of course, there were some things that didn't change. For second granduncle, these years were just like changing a rocking chair and sleeping a few times. As for where he slept, whether it was in Qing and Prefecture or the capital, Suzhou or Rui, it made no difference to him. There were still many things that didn't change. Li Xian was still so stupid and heartless. Mingzhu's heart was still biased towards the people of the Jing kingdom and the world. He still couldn't beat Rui, and couldn't get back his dignity as a man. He had made many friends and also many enemies. The people he cared about, some were right in front of him, and some were far away. In retrospect, it had only been a few years. Li Duan ran over from afar excitedly and said, "Dad, I want to be Grandpa Chang's disciple. Grandpa Chang is more powerful than Auntie. I want to learn martial arts from him, and I will be more powerful than Auntie in the future." Li Duan was still too young. There was a truth that he would only understand when he grew up. Having a woman was not only his father's destiny, but also his destiny. If his life could be divided into 4 seasons, then before he could remember, it had always been spring. After he could remember, or more accurately, after he knew the meaning of the word auntie, his life had passed through summer and autumn, and turned to winter. Li Yi couldn't bear to hurt a 4-year-old child. He hadn't experienced Rui's power. In another 2 years, even his master wouldn't dare to say that he was more powerful than Rui. Otherwise, Chang wouldn't have blushed. He should have blushed for deceiving a 4-year-old child at his age. Feng strode in from outside and said, "Young master, everything is ready. When should we leave?" Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Early April then." The world was big, and life was not limited to Feng and Changde. There were also Wanru and the Taoist nun in the Qi kingdom, Shaoning and Emingzu in the capital. Chapter 1109. A long time ago, Li Yi had been planning a long journey. Since the early years of Jinghe, for a long period of time, their family of 4 had been focused on survival. At that time, he had introduced candied hawthorns, strong liquor, and ruidu only because he wanted his family to have enough to eat, live in a big house, and not have to worry about their livelihood. Later, when he came to the capital, whether it was to promote various reforms in the Jing kingdom or to help Emingzu build momentum, they were all half-heartedly welcomed. In fact, it had nothing to do with him. Not long ago, he helped Yang Liuqing to rebel. Although there was a small, almost negligible subjective factor in it, it was not closely related to him. Li Yi felt that he was not even as good as Feng. In the summer of the early years of Jing He, Feng once told him that his dream was to have a beautiful wife and a big house. A long time ago, his dream came true. Although his wife was not beautiful enough, and his concubines were not beautiful enough, the house was big enough, and he had achieved his life goal. What about himself? Thinking about it carefully, Li Yi did not know what his dream was from the beginning to the end. He did not know before, and he did not know now. In terms of status and power, he had already reached the peak of what an ordinary person could achieve. If he wanted to take another step forward, he would have to rebel and become the emperor. It was impossible for him to become the emperor of the Jing kingdom. It was even more impossible for him to become the emperor of the Wu kingdom, the Qi kingdom, and the Zhao kingdom. He really had no interest in becoming the emperor. Having reached this step, he did not want to go any further. In terms of family, his wife and concubines were beautiful. Some were gentle like water, and some were passionate like fire. The family was harmonious, and the husband and wife were harmonious. Except that sometimes his waist was weak, he had no other shortcomings. In terms of personal strength, he still had his goal. He did not want to dominate the martial arts world, and he did not expect to surpass Rui in his lifetime. He only wanted to become a guru before Rui and Emingzu, and teach them how to be a qualified sister-in-law and a qualified princess. It was a pity that this was his only dream, and it was hopeless. Rui and Mingzhu's breakthrough depended on luck, but he depended on fate. Therefore, he could only pursue other things. For example, when they were free, they could walk out of Wishful Will City, out of the Jing Nation, and go to other places on this continent to have a look. That way, his trip here would not be in vain. Jingping 3rd year. Wuren 7th year. Wang Yuan 27th year. July. Li Xian walked out of his room and scratched his messy hair. Last night, he had pulled an all-nighter to correct a few parameters. He then sent someone to the Academy of Engineering for further adjustments. Li Yi did not send him a red barbarian cannon, but he did send him a blueprint. After some modifications by the Academy of Science, the range and accuracy of the cannon had been improved slightly. Even after a sleepless night, he still looked full of energy. He laid down on the rocking chair outside and took out a letter from his bosom. He muttered, "I can't believe he ran so fast. I wanted to go out incognito again." He received this letter 2 months ago. At that time, Li Yi and his family had left to travel. He had not received any letters in the past few months. He did not say where they went, nor did he say when they would be back. He took the letter back, feeling empty in his heart. He sighed and murmured, "When will these days come to an end?" A figure ran from afar. When he ran to Li Xian, he stopped and said respectfully, "Brother." Li Xian looked at him and asked, "Going to the Women's Academy again?" Li Han said sternly, "Royal sister asked me to train those mathematics teachers." Li Xian waved his hand and said, "Don't use this reason every time. I know you are looking for the girl called Duan Wu. I have said many times that a gentleman wants a fair lady. It's nothing." Li Han's face turned red. At 16 years old, he was only half a head shorter than Li Xian. A few years ago, he was a fatty who was extremely afraid of mathematics. Now, he had become a handsome young man. Li Xian changed the topic. He looked at him and suddenly asked, "Little Han, you are already 16 years old this year, right?" Li Han nodded. Li Xian thought for a moment and said, 16 isn't young anymore. According to the marriage laws of the Jing kingdom, it's a suitable age for marriage. Your mother has already mentioned it to me many times. It's time to arrange a marriage for you and wait 2 years before you get married. I think that Lady Duan Wu looks very delicate and pretty, and her family background is also clean. Her family background isn't that much different now. A hint of joy appeared on Li Han's face. He forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart. Li Xian shook his head at this time and said, "But, Duan Wu is Li Yi's cousin and Li Yi is your teacher. In between, there is a difference in seniority. This is not right, not right. I think you should choose a girl from the Wang family or the Yang family to be your princess." Li Han was stunned for a moment and his face began to turn pale. Li Xian stood up from the rocking chair and said, "However, if you really like that girl Duan Wu, it's fine. I can help you. But before that, you have to promise me something first." On this side, Li Xian and Li Han seemed to have entered into some kind of secret discussion. On the other side of the lake, the girl holding the sword knocked away the wooden sword in the hands of another girl. She nodded and said, "It's better than a few days ago." Again. The girl picked up the wooden sword and rushed over again. The clothes of the two figures fluttered in the wind. Their postures were beautiful and pleasing to the eye. On the side of the lake, two women looked over. On the left, a woman wearing a phoenix coronet withdrew her gaze from the two girls and looked at the other person next to her and said, "In the blink of an eye, Shaoning has grown so big. If I remember correctly, after this year, she will be 18, right?" The woman on the right who looked younger nodded and said, "Sister remembers correctly. This year, Bing Ning is already 18 years old. Time makes people grow old. Now, even Bing Ning has grown up. It seems that we are really old." The woman who was already the Empress Dowager sighed and said, "It's time to find a good husband for her. I'll ask Xian to pay more attention to see if there are any young talents in the capital city who are worthy of her." Concubine Yen shook her head and looked at the girl on the lawn and said, "Your Majesty is busy every day. Don't worry too much. Bing Ning, it's not time yet." The 3rd year of Jingping in the Jing Kingdom was the 7th year of Wuren in the Wu Kingdom and the 27th year of Zhangyuan in the Qi Kingdom. This year for the Jing Kingdom was a year of recuperation and continued growth. In the past few years, the people's taxes had been reduced again and again, but the national treasury was increasingly full. The agriculture and commerce went hand in hand, and the country's military strength was even more powerful. It seemed to be suppressing the Qi Kingdom and becoming the leader of all countries. Compared with the Jing Kingdom, the situation in the Wu Kingdom had changed dramatically. At the beginning of the 7th year of Wuren, eldest Princess Duanrong made a strong comeback and seized 6 provinces, including Cangzhou, Nanzhou, and Linzhou. Later, several provinces surrendered voluntarily. In the past 6 months, they had been recuperating and developing steadily. In a short time, they had taken over 17 provinces, which was almost half of the provinces controlled by the imperial court of the Wu Kingdom. In the 8th month of the 7th year of Wuren, when Princess Duanrong had taken over 20 provinces, the imperial court finally realized that Princess Duanrong and the others had the strength to overthrow them. On the 13th of the 8th month, the Wu Emperor issued another decree. He would personally lead an army of 200,000 to suppress the rebels. On the 14th of the 8th month, the Wu Emperor was assassinated in the palace. Several ministers rebelled. Fortunately, the other guards fought each other to the death. Although they killed the assassins, the Wu Emperor was also seriously injured. On the 15th of the 8th month, during the morning court session, a eunuch sent word that the Wu Emperor's personal expedition was cancelled. In the 27th year of the Zhangyuan era, this year, the Qi Kingdom was not as peaceful as the Jing Kingdom. There was no turmoil like in the Wu Kingdom, and the emperor did not go on 2 consecutive personal expeditions. The emperor of the Qi Kingdom's health was deteriorating, but he was still far from death. The 2 princes were still fighting for the throne with all their might. The ministers in the imperial court were divided into 2 factions, neither giving way. The dispute was almost white-hot. In the autumn of the 27th year of the Zhangyuan era in the Qi Kingdom, Lin Yong strode into a small courtyard. Before he arrived, his voice reached the courtyard. "Miss, they'll be here soon." Chapter 11:10. Goodbye, Shopkeeper Lin. We'll leave this batch of goods to Shopkeeper Lin. If Shopkeeper Lin comes to Liuzhou in the future, please send someone to inform us. We'll have to rely on him in the future. A few stewards walked out of the courtyard and turned around to greet a woman. Although the person in front of them was a woman, she was known as the Hua Mulan of the business world. Not only was she outstanding in appearance, but her ability was also not to be underestimated. In a short span of 4 years, she was able to turn a small clan that could not be shown in public into a giant in the business world. Even those rich and powerful clans that had hundreds of years of history could not be compared to them. Of course, part of this was due to her heaven-defying background, but the role of this woman called Lin Wanru could not be ignored. They did not expect to be able to hitch a ride on the Lin family's wagon. They just wanted to pick up the leftovers. It was enough for the family to take a small step forward in Liuzhou. We are businessmen. It's always mutually beneficial. You're welcome. Lin Wanru nodded. She did not show any enthusiasm, but she did not alienate them either. Then we'll take our leave. The few of them chatted for a while more before leaving. When Lin Wanru walked back to her room, Lin Yong walked in quickly from outside. Lin Yong's face was filled with joy. He quickly said, "Miss, the Li brothers have written again." Lin Wanru nodded. She did not have any expression on her face. She said, "Put it down. I'll check the accounts first. I'll look at it later." "Oh." Lin Yong responded and put the letter on the table. He sat on a chair on the other side, poured himself a cup of tea, and drank it leisurely. Every time Brother Li wrote a letter, the young miss would always have this indifferent expression. It looked like she didn't care at all, but the young miss shouldn't think that he, Lin Yong, was stupid. After all, he had watched the young miss grow up. Some of her thoughts could not be hidden from him. She kept every letter from the Li brothers. Whenever she had time, she would take them out and read them. She even imitated his handwriting. She thought that she did not know, but in fact, Xiaofan had told her everything. The more she pretended to be normal, the more abnormal she was. This was not a good thing. She would be 23 this year, and she had no idea at all. She was a 23-year-old girl, and some of her children were about to be engaged. If the Li brothers came and she was still like this, she would not be able to get married at 32, let alone 23. 4 years. How many 4 years did she have to wait? After drinking a cup of tea, Lin Yong finally could not help reminding her, "Miss, you are holding the account book upside down." Lin Wanru looked up at him and straightened the account book without changing her expression. She said, "Why don't you go out? Don't you have work to do?" Lin Yong grinned and said, "I have finished my work today. I want to have a cup of tea and have a rest." Lin Wanru looked at the account book for a while. When she reached for the teacup, she seemed to take the letter. She opened the envelope and casually took a sip of tea. She did not put down the teacup and looked at the letter. Lin Yong could not help saying, "In fact, you don't need to read it. The brother who sent the letter said that the Li brothers would be here in a few days." "Well, I see." Lin Wanru took another sip of tea and said calmly, "Mississippi," Lin Yong suddenly said. "Yes." Lin Wanru raised her head and looked at him. Lin Yong pushed the teapot over and said, "Pour some water into the teacup. You have been drinking with an empty cup for so long. I feel uncomfortable seeing you. Get out." Lin Yong ran out of the room in a sorry state. He picked up the account book that had been thrown out of the room and put it on the stone table outside. Then, he sat down on the stone bench and put his hands behind his head. He hummed a tune and a smile appeared on his honest face. The Li brothers were finally coming. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was related to the marriage of the Mississippi. He had to be very careful and not let the miss do whatever she wanted in her previous life. To have such a considerate servant, how much good karma must the miss have accumulated in her previous life? Of course, it had been more than 4 years since he had eaten the food made by the Li brothers. Thinking about it, it was really memorable. Liuzhou was not part of the capital region of the Qi Kingdom. It was some distance away from the capital, but it was still a major commercial town. This time, the leader of the Lin family came to Liuzhou to deal with the business of the Lin family in Suzhou. There were many Lin family in the Qi Kingdom. However, in the eyes of the businessmen in the Qi Kingdom, there was only one Lin family that they usually talked about. That was the Lin family in Fengzhou. The Lin family in Fengzhou was a legend. In other words, the leader of the Lin family in Fengzhou, the woman named Lin Wanru, was a legend. 5 or 6 years ago, the Lin family was still a medium-sized family in Fengzhou. Several generations of them had been in the jewelry business. Although they could be regarded as a rich family, it was only relative to ordinary people. The family had some savings and did not have much power. There were a lot of families in every prefecture. However, 5 or 6 years ago the situation changed. First, the Lin family used a year to make the jewelry business famous in the Qi Kingdom. Even the concubines in the palace wanted jewelry from the Lin family. Then, the development of the Lin family was even more unstoppable. 4 years ago, the Lin family started to get involved in perfume, underwear, ready-made clothes, soap, liquor, and many other industries. These were all profiteering industries in the Qi kingdom. The reason was that these things could only be found in the Jing kingdom. The businessmen in the Qi kingdom had to brave many dangers and difficulties to transport these things back from the Jing kingdom. Naturally, the prices were high. Since the Lin family got involved in these industries, this market was completely broken. The low-priced and high-quality goods were very popular among the people. However, it was not the case for many businessmen. Cutting off one's source of wealth was like killing one's parents. Naturally, there were some businessmen who regarded her as a thorn in their side. However, when they wanted to take action against the Lin family, they found out how powerful the Lin family was. Since several families joined forces to make things difficult for the Lin family and alerted the third prince, no one dared to do so. Only then did they find out that the one who supported the Lin family was the third prince, who was at the peak of his power in the Qi kingdom and was even more famous than the crown prince. Since then, the Lin family developed even faster. Because of their powerful background and sufficient supply, they did not need to travel far to the Jing kingdom to get what they wanted. They avoided many risks. When it came to perfume, ready-made clothes and other goods, all merchants in the Qi kingdom were willing to cooperate with them. In just 4 years, the Lin family became one of the wealthiest merchant families in the Qi kingdom from a medium-sized family in the Feng province. In terms of wealth, only a few families with deep roots could compare to them. In terms of influence, the Lin family with King Feng behind them did not lose to any of the wealthy families. Although all of this was on the premise that King Feng still had the upper hand in the competition with the crown prince, before that, the Lin family would not fall as long as King Feng did not fall. In fact, there was one more thing that no one could figure out. Even though the Lin family was backed by the third prince, the ready-made clothes and underwear of the Lin family could be imitated to a certain extent. However, the perfumes, spirits and soaps involved strictly confidential secret recipes and could not be imitated. Moreover, the origin of the perfumes and soaps was in the Jing kingdom. If others wanted to buy them, they had to travel thousands of miles to the capital of the Jing kingdom. However, the Lin family directly built a factory in the Qi kingdom. Could it be that the Lin family and the person behind the production of the perfumes and soaps in the Jing kingdom had some unknown deal? Of course, no one knew about this. Chapter 11:11. The Qi Kingdom, the capital city. Prince Heng's residence. Zhao Zheng paced back and forth in the hall with a gloomy expression. He grumbled. What is Imperial Father thinking? Has he become muddle-headed from his illness? If you want me to become the regent, then so be it. Why do you want Zhao Yi to supervise from the side? Why do you want him and his accomplices to find trouble with I all day long, making I lose face in front of the court officials? Why does your highness care about these things? Behind him, a young man smiled and said, As long as your highness is the crown prince, your status will be higher than the third prince's. His majesty has him supervise from the side only to supervise your highness. Your highness is the saber, and Zhao Yi is only the whetstone. Otherwise, the regent would be the third prince, not your highness. Until the very last moment, no one will know Imperial Father's thoughts. Zhao Zheng's face was full of vexation. He suddenly looked at the young man behind him and said, Protector Feng, I know that your empress is very powerful. As long as you can help I obtain the throne, I can promise you that after I ascend the throne, I will establish the holy religion as the national religion. Feng Yu's eyes flashed, but he was not in a hurry to agree. Instead, he smiled and said, Your highness, do not worry. Between the third prince and your highness, since the empress has chosen your highness, she will definitely do her best to help. Zhao Jing looked at him and said, Not her best, but definitely. Protector Feng, do you understand what I mean? Feng Yu was silent for a moment, then said, This matter, I still have to discuss with the empress. Your highness, I will take my leave. I still have some matters to attend to, so I will not see you off, Protector Feng. After Feng Yu left, an old man walked out from the back of the hall and walked to Zhao Zheng's side. He bowed and asked doubtfully, Your highness, those people, are they really so powerful? Don't underestimate them. Zhao Zheng looked out of the hall and said slowly, The power of the holy religion is far beyond our imagination. I suspect that they have people hiding in the palace. Even in Ai's palace, not everyone is Ai's man. The old man pondered for a moment and said, Your Highness, please forgive this old official for speaking out of turn. This holy religion is so powerful that they must have a motive. Your Highness must be very careful if they join hands with them. I know. Zhao Zhang nodded and said, No matter what they want, the most important thing now is to ascend to that position. As for the rest, it won't be too late to settle it in the future. The three protector Feng, Hang. When Feng Yu left the Hang Prince's palace, the two protectors in purple were already waiting outside. The three of them passed through a few more alleys and after a few turns, they arrived in front of a small courtyard. He gently knocked on the door and waited for a while before he pushed it open and entered. Passing through the courtyard, they came to a room. The door was not closed. Feng Yu walked in and saw the middle-aged Taoist nun meditating on the bed. He looked at the middle-aged Taoist nun and asked tentatively, Your Highness, Zhao Zhang is a little impatient. Should we? The Taoist nun opened her eyes and seemed to be able to see through his thoughts. Feng Yu felt a chill in his heart. After a long time she said, Helping Zhao Zhang to ascend the throne is not our goal. How is the matter I asked you to do? Feng Yu lowered his head and said, In the past few years, under the efforts of the protectors in purple, the officials around Zhao Zhang have been infiltrated by 30%. 30%? The Taoist nun's expression was calm as she repeated. Feng Yu paused for a moment, then said with difficulty, To 20%. Only 20%. The Taoist nun closed her eyes and said, I told you long ago that you cannot be impatient. Do you still remember what our ultimate goal is? I do. Feng Yu nodded and said, We will make Prince Heng a mere figurehead and help him ascend the throne. We will secretly control the Qi kingdom and when the time is right, we will have him send troops to the Jing kingdom to avenge our family. His expression was calm, but his eyes shone brightly. In the battle for the throne of Qi kingdom, the reason why they didn't choose the third prince, who had more advantages, and chose Zhao Zhang was because he was the crown prince and had a righteous cause, and also because he was stupid. Compared to the extremely intelligent third prince Zhao Yi, Zhao Zhang was more suitable to be a puppet emperor. Supporting a puppet emperor and making him the secret controller of the Qi kingdom was a very fulfilling thing. However, how could supporting a puppet emperor be more fulfilling than being the emperor himself? Compared to being the secret controller of the Qi kingdom, it seemed better to be the one in the open, right? The Jing kingdom was so powerful now that even if Qi and Zhao joined forces, they would not be a match for it. In the past, they still had the king of Shu, who was their only hope. Now that the king of Shu had been captured due to his carelessness, it was easier said than done to overthrow the Jing kingdom. If he could ascend to a high position and stand above millions, what did it matter if he did not avenge the Feng family? Of course, he could only hide these thoughts in his heart. He could not let his aunt, the empress of the holy religion, know about them. It's good that you know. The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at him and said, When the officials around Zhao Zhang have infiltrated 50%, the emperor will die. Feng Yu bowed and said, I understand. The Taoist nun nodded and said, You may leave. I will take my leave. Feng Yu bowed and left. After walking out of the room and through the courtyard, Feng Yu let out a long sigh of relief. A purple-robed man stepped forward and said in a deep voice, Guardian, we have just received news that the believers in Lu province are no longer contactable. What? Feng Yu's expression changed drastically. He said angrily, Another province. After a while, the purple-robed man finished explaining the situation. It must be her. It must be her. Feng Yu was furious and even looked a little deranged. The believers of the holy religion were spread across the provinces of the Qi kingdom. Every month, they would send news to the capital. However, since the beginning of the year, they had lost contact with more than 10 provinces. The struggle for the throne between Zhao Zhang and the third prince had reached the most critical moment. The empress could not go out. He had sent the yellow emissary and the blue emissary, but none of them had returned. It was as if they had vanished from the face of the earth. They had completely lost contact. As a result, he did not dare to send purple-robed emissaries. Every purple-robed emissary had been painstakingly trained. The loss of one was a great loss to them. However, the consequence of this was that every fortnight, he would receive news that they had lost contact with a province. By now, more than 10 provinces had been lost. This situation was exactly the same as when they were in Shu province. Later, he realized that not only Shu province, but the believers of the entire Jing kingdom were no longer contactable. Aside from the other empress of the holy religion, who else could it be? From the moment they began spreading the word that there were two empresses in the holy religion, this matter had become irreparable. At that time, no one, including the empress, had expected that this unintentional action would become the source of the schism of the holy religion. Not only did the other side have the empress, they also had the envoy of the left. If they continued to ignore this matter, their foundation in the Qi kingdom would be destroyed. Feng Yu turned around and sternly said, "I'll go tell the empress and ask her to make a decision." In the room, the cross-legged middle-aged Taoist nun opened her eyes again. After a moment of thought, she said, "He's here." Outside the city gate of Liuzhou, a few carriages slowly entered. Su Zhang and the others had arrived in Lu province a month ago and had completely taken over the branch of the holy religion. For the past few months, whenever they arrived at a place, the first thing they did was to take over the believers of the holy religion in that province. Although there were some who were stubborn and unreasonable, they would try to reason with them when Feng punched them. If Taoist nun had not personally come, they could have even used this method to reunite the holy religion. However, half a month ago, Ruoqing found out that she was pregnant. They could only slow down their pace and find a place to rest first. Feng sat outside the carriage and turned around to say, "Young master, the capital of Lu province is just up ahead." Outside the capital, Li Yi alighted from the carriage and took a few steps forward. He extended his hand to the woman who was waiting outside the city. "Long time no see." Chapter 11-12. The handshake ceremony was a custom in Miss Lin's hometown. If he hadn't inquired about it out of curiosity when they passed by Feng Zhou, Feng would have believed what the son-in-law had said. He looked at the two people who were holding hands not far away and fell into deep thought. The handshake ceremony was a custom in the Li brothers' hometown. If he hadn't asked someone to confirm it when they went to Jing Kingdom last time, Lin Yong would have believed what Miss Lin had said. He looked at the two people beside him who looked calm and relaxed, deep in thought. He suddenly felt something and looked up at the opposite side. The man opposite also looked at him. They looked at each other. Feng smiled and said, "Lin brothers, long time no see." A smile also appeared on Lin Yong's face. He cupped his hands and said, "Brother Feng, long time no see." Lin Wanru and Lin Yong came to Liuzhou this time to expand their business. In the past few years, from the remote Fengzhou, she had expanded the Lin family's business all over the Qi kingdom. She had personally expanded the business in almost every province and prefecture. Of course, it could also be said that it was the Li family's business. Because a few years ago, the Lin family and the Li family had formed a community of destiny because of their business relationship. They shared weal and woe, and they were as close as a family. The Lin family had a manor in Liuzhou. Every time she went to a place, she would buy a manor and rest there temporarily. In the past few years, she had traveled to all the provinces and prefectures of the Qi kingdom and the Lin family. Ruoqing and the others were tired from the long journey. Lin Wanru's maid Xiaofan took them to the back house to settle down. The house was very big, and it was more than enough for the whole family. Li Duan was a little excited. He was at the age where his curiosity was budding, and he didn't like to stay in one place all the time. He had seen many strange things along the way, and he was the happiest one. "This must be Dwainer." Lin Wanru looked at him and said with a smile, "The last time I saw him, he couldn't even crawl. In the blink of an eye, he has grown so much." "In the blink of an eye." Lin Yong sighed and said, "In the blink of an eye, it has been 4 or 5 years." Old Feng glanced at Lin Yong in surprise. He closed his mouth, which was about to open. Li Duan stood there and looked at Li Yi with a pleading look. Calling a person was the most basic form of courtesy, but he did not know this beautiful one. He did not know how to address the person in front of him. The last time Lin Wanru went to the capital, Li Duan was still young and didn't even know how to crawl. Naturally, he couldn't remember her. Li Yi touched his head and said, "Call her Aunt Lin." Li Duan nodded and said obediently, "Aunt Lin." Lin Wanru smiled and said, "Dwainer is still as obedient as when he was young." Li Duan lowered his head in embarrassment. When Li Yi and Lin Wanru went to the back house, he looked up at Feng and asked, "Feng, Aunt Lin, should I call her mother?" According to his experience, from aunt to mother was only a matter of time. It was just that he couldn't grasp the timing. A long time ago, he discovered that Lil Auntie didn't know everything. Uncle Fong was omniscient. If there was something he didn't understand and it wasn't convenient to ask his father, he could ask Uncle Fong. Fong thought for a moment and said, "Don't call her yet. When you want to call her, Fong will tell you." "I see. Thank you, Fong." Li Duan nodded and ran to the back house. Fong looked ahead. Lin Yong had just gone in with them. He touched his beardless chin and murmured, "This Lin Brothers is interesting." Drunk Ink, Ruoqing and the others were a little tired from the journey. After settling down, they went back to their rooms to rest. Li Duan went to practice. Chang's requirements for him were a little stricter than Mississippi Lu. Although he was tired, his advantages were also very obvious. Rui became a guru. Luck and cheating played a big part. Her understanding of martial arts was certainly not as thorough as Su and Chong. And Chong was different from Su. Chong grew up in the palace since he was a child and was qualified to read the royal library, which contained countless martial arts secrets. Compared with Su, it was like the relationship between a rich and powerful sect and a rogue cultivator. In terms of fighting, it was not certain who was better. But in terms of profound knowledge, Su and his old lover were no match for him. Perhaps only old man Yang could compare with Chong. What's more, Chong was not limited to giving advice to Li Duan. He really taught him everything without holding anything back. Li Duan, who was only 5 years old, had already cultivated internal force. Ordinary adult men were no match for him. Ruoqing and the others went to rest. Li Yi didn't need to rest, and it was not appropriate for him to rest. He hadn't seen Lin Wanru for several years. He should have had a lot to say, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know where to start. "Young master, I'm going out with the Lin brothers." "Miss, I'll take Brother Fong out for a walk." Fong and Lin Yong, who were following behind the two of them, suddenly spoke at the same time. They spoke in unison, as if they had a tacit understanding. After a moment of shock, the two of them turned their heads at the same time. Their gazes met, and they confirmed each other's gazes. At the same time, there was an expression of mutual appreciation on their faces. When Fong and Lin Yong saw each other again, their relationship had progressed at lightning speed. With their arms around each other's shoulders, they walked out, leaving only Li Yi and Lin Wanru in the room. All these years, cough. Li Yi looked at her, then shifted his gaze away. "You've worked hard." The Lin family's business in the Qi Kingdom was actually more like the Li family's business in the Qi Kingdom. The Li family's shares were more, and what they invested were the core formulas and the like. But other than these, there was nothing else. All the shops and workshops in the Qi Kingdom were built by her alone, including the expansion of the business in one state after another. In 4 years, she had spread the shops all over the Qi Kingdom. One could imagine the hardships involved in this. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "There's nothing hard about it. In fact, I've been busy like this in the past. Being busy with results is always better than not having any results." After saying this, Li found himself speechless again. Compared to a few years ago when he was in Feng state, there seemed to be an additional layer of invisible membrane between the two of them. This slight barrier made him feel a little irritated. Because of the irritated feeling, he felt a little thirsty. He walked to the table, took a teacup, poured a cup of water, and drank it in one gulp. Only then did the irritation in his heart subside a little. Lin Wanru coughed softly and said, "You used my cup again." I'm sorry. Li Yi almost coughed out the mouthful of water. He hurriedly put down the teacup. Then he realized something and asked, "Why did you say again?" "Forget it." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "Anyway, it's not the first time." She walked over and took out a few account books from the cabinet and handed them to him. She said, "If Manager Li has nothing to do, help me check the accounts." Li Yi was startled. He felt as if something that had been lost for a long time had come back. He smiled and said, "I'm just an accountant. If there's anything, just tell shopkeeper Lin." Lin Yong and Fong, who were sitting in the courtyard strolling, turned their heads at the same time. When they heard the laughter coming from the room, they turned back at the same time and looked at each other again. Fong looked at Lin Yong and suddenly said, "Lin brothers, my son-in-law and your young lady are the kind of people who are reserved. They won't open their mouths until the last moment. As servants," he paused and asked, "Lin brothers, do you know what I'm going to say?" Understood, understood. Lin Yong grinned and said, some things they are reserved, but we can't be reserved. Fong was stunned for a moment and laughed casually. Why didn't I realize before that Lin brothers are so interesting? I regret not having met earlier. It's really like old friends at first sight. You can only use like old friends at first sight when you meet for the first time. Lin Yong looked at Fong and corrected him. Brother Fong needs to read more books. Are you saying that I'm uncultured? Fong's face darkened and said, you used regret not having met earlier correctly? I didn't have the nerve to expose you just now. Chapter 11-13. Fong and Lin Yong really loved each other. When they walked out just now, they put their arms around each other's shoulders and called each other brother. Li Yi checked the accounts for a while. When he walked out of the room again, he saw Lin Yong hanging on the tree by Fong. Fong's strength was beyond doubt, and others could not be envious of him at all. He was born with great strength. When his family conditions were not good, he only looked stronger than others. Later, when the material conditions kept up, he began to leave ordinary people far behind. Coupled with the training of second granduncle, even Li Yi did not dare to say that he could easily defeat him. His fists were too heavy, and one punch could kill someone. Lin Yong only had some skills, but he could only be regarded as half a person in the martial arts world. Of course, he was no match for Fong. Li brothers, save me, save me. Lin Yong hung on the tree. Seeing Li Yi coming out, he seemed to see his savior. Li Yi glanced at Fong, and then Fong jumped on the tree reluctantly and put him down. In fact, Ruoqing's pregnancy was somewhat beyond their expectation. This time, they came to the Qi Kingdom for one more important thing in addition to sightseeing: to unify the holy religion. Su Zhang was indeed a rare talent. In the later generations, he would definitely be the leader of a multi-level marketing organization, a large-scale one, and the #1 target of the state to crack down and ban. Their doctrine had become to persuade people to do good, leading the so-called holy religion founded by Taoist nun to the right path. All the believers had the right to believe or not at any time. In essence, there was not much difference from the regular religions in the later generations. However, it was impossible for Su Zhang to complete this difficult task alone. No matter how high his status was, it was not higher than that of Taoist nun. Many things needed Ruoqing to do. Now that Ruoqing was pregnant, Li Yi naturally would not let her appear in public again. The matter of the holy religion was put aside for the time being. Along the way, they collected a lot of news about the Qi Kingdom. The emperor of the Qi Kingdom had been ill for a long time and did not care about the state affairs. These years, he had been ill several times and almost died, but in the end, he did not die. If he died, it would be straightforward. The eldest prince Zhao Zhang was the legitimate crown prince. Before the emperor died, there was no edict to depose the crown prince. He would be the new emperor. The third prince Zhao Yi would have to go wherever he wanted. Unless he rebelled or Zhao Jing suddenly became hysterical and passed the throne to him, he would have no fate with the throne in this life. However, as long as the old emperor did not die, Zhao Zhang was only the crown prince. If he reached out in advance, it would also be a rebellion. Therefore, the two people and the two forces were in a deadlock. However, the emperor of the Qi Kingdom not only let the eldest prince, Zhao Zhang, supervise the state, but also let the third prince, Zhao Yi, supervise from the side. It was not hard to imagine what the court of the Qi Kingdom would be like. Of course, there were benefits to doing this, and they were not small. The two forces were at odds with each other. Each was waiting to seize the other's weakness and mistake, so neither dared to make mistakes. When Li Yi left, the Qi Kingdom was in constant dispute because of the discussion of the silver for crimes. The people were not calm, and it was said that several states had revolted. When he came back this time, those hidden dangers in the Qi Kingdom were all gone. A few years ago, under the leadership of the third prince, the court adopted a gentle method and implemented the debit and credit bookkeeping system. Until now, it had been quite effective. Although the corruption among the officials had not been completely stopped, it had been quite effective. As expected, those who could become the emperor were not easy to deal with. Li Yi did not know what the emperor of the Qi Kingdom thought about the struggle for the throne, but he did play a good hand. For a long time, including now, the prosperity of the Qi Kingdom was justified. If it was not for the rapid rise of the Jing Kingdom in recent years, perhaps they would still be living under the shadow of the Qi Kingdom. As for who would become the emperor of the Qi Kingdom, Li Yi did not care much. It had little to do with him. Whether Zhao Zheng or Zhao Yi took over the Qi kingdom, they would not pose much of a threat to the Jing kingdom. A long time ago, the Jing kingdom had been at the forefront of the times, and the speed of its advancement was getting faster and faster, leaving the other countries far behind. It even had the perspective of God. Li Xian had been improving the cannons, and he had also begun to develop and supervise the manufacture of many other types of firearms. As long as they did not encounter an extremely fatuous emperor who overthrew everything they had done, the current Jing kingdom was not something that the Qi kingdom could catch up with even if it had one or a few wise emperors. Under such circumstances, of course, he hoped that Zhao Yi would be the one to take over. All his life, he was not fond of owing favors. He did not like owing favors to women, and he did not like owing favors to men. The former could be repaid with his body, but if he wanted to repay the latter, he would have to do something else. There was no doubt that the third prince, Zhao Yi, had played a great role in the smooth sailing of the Lin family's business for the past few years. It could be said that he had taken good care of Wanru. This was a great favor. Just based on this point, the scales in his heart had to tilt in favor of him. Of course, it was impossible for him to go to his side and give him advice now, but he did not mind giving him a push when it was necessary. Lin Wanru walked out of the room and gave some instructions to Lin Yong. Although the Liuzhou was far from the capital of the Qi kingdom, and it was not considered an important military town, it was a big commercial province. Geographically speaking, the Liuzhou was in the hinterland of the Qi kingdom and did not border other countries, so it did not have the conditions to become a big commercial province. However, the people of the Liuzhou had been raising silkworms for generations, and the silk of the Liuzhou was famous far and wide. This time, Lin Wanru came to expand the silk and clothing business. If it was successful, perhaps the Liuzhou would become their biggest clothing base in the Qi kingdom. Lin Yong looked at Li Yi, who was not far away, and then looked at Lin Wanru, and asked, "Miss, how long will we stay in the Liuzhou this time?" Lin Wanru was the helmsman of the Lin family. She only needed to ensure that the general direction was not wrong, so she did not need to stay in the Liuzhou for a long time. Other things would be handled by the steward. After thinking for a while, she said, "About a month." Lin Yong looked at Li Yi and asked, "Li brothers, how long will you stay in the Liuzhou?" Ruoqing was pregnant. They could either go back to Xuzhou or Rui City now, or stay here and wait for her to give birth. Although Rui City and Xuzhou were more suitable for nurturing the fetus, they were already deep in the Qi kingdom. If they went back, it would probably take a few months. The journey would be tiring and bumpy. After discussing with Li Yi and Rui, they decided to stay in the Liuzhou and go back after she gave birth. However, in this way, their plan to detour from the Qi kingdom to the Jing kingdom would have to be put on hold. Li Yi thought for a while and said, "Less than a year." During this time, naturally, he would not only wait for Ruoqing to give birth, but also carefully plan the affairs of the holy religion and the business of the Qi kingdom. Miss Lin only planned to stay here for a month, but the Li brothers wanted to stay for almost a year. Lin Yong thought for a while, looked at Lin Wanru, and said, "Miss, I think that the Liuzhou is different from other places. The business here is developed, and there are many rich businessmen. If we enter the Liuzhou abruptly and meddle in the business of the Liuzhou, I'm afraid that they will be dissatisfied and suppress us. In order to avoid accidents, I'm afraid we should stay for a few more days. It's safer this way." "Miss, what do you think?" Hearing this, Lin Wanru nodded and said, "You're right. Then let's stay for a few more days." Lin Yong agreed deeply. He smiled and said, "I think we should also stay for a year and a half. It should be enough." Lin Wanru looked at him and frowned slightly. When she was about to speak, a young man knocked on the courtyard door and walked in with a few attendants. "Miss Lin," he looked at Lin Wanru and said with a smile, "I'm here to discuss the cooperation between the Lin and Lu families." Lin Wanru and the young man went to the parlor. Lin Yong did not follow them. He walked to Li Yi and said, "They are from the Lu family. The Lu family is the largest magnate in the Liuzhou. They are relatives of the royal family and have been in the silk business for generations." Li Yi looked at Lin Yong in surprise. He seemed to be a little too talkative today. These days, he comes here every day to talk about cooperation. Lin Yong pursed his lips and said, "Don't think that I can't see it. What business talk?" He has been dragging the matter of cooperation. He is here to pursue our family's miss. Li Yi continued to look at him. "I just remembered and said it casually. Seeing Li Yi look at him, Lin Yong waved his hand and said, I definitely did not say that he is Li brothers' rival in love. I also did not hint at you to pursue our Mississippi Li brothers. Please don't misunderstand. Please don't misunderstand. Chapter 11:14. The young man walked out of the hall and cupped his hands at Lin Wanru. He said, Miss Wanru, I believe you know that this is good for both the Lin and Lu families. I hope you can consider what I have said. Lin Wanru shook her head and simply said, If young Master Lu is referring to something other than cooperation, then there is no need to consider it. The young man was not angry. He only smiled and said, I have come with sincerity. Miss Lin, there is no need to reject me. We still have some time, so you don't have to rush to answer. With that, he cupped his hands and left. When he left, his eyes paused on Li Yi for a moment. But it was only for a moment, and he slowly walked out. Li brothers, look, this young Master Lu is also handsome and elegant. If you don't seize the opportunity. Before Lin Yong could finish, he was dragged away by Fong with his mouth covered. Li Yi raised his head and looked at Lin Wanru. He asked, Are you having trouble with your business? It's not really a problem. Lin Wanru shook her head and sat across from him. She said, The Lu family in Liuzhou is also in the cloth and silk business. In recent years, they have expanded into ready-made clothing. It is more or less the same as us. We are in the same place and doing the same business. If we can't be friends, we can only be enemies. Moreover, Liuzhou is only so big. The big families have already divided the resources. It is not so easy for us to get another piece of the pie. They have the materials and the market. We have the technology. Cooperation is a win-win situation. Li Yi looked at her and asked, You don't seem too willing? What they want is not just cooperation. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, They want me to marry them. She looked at Li Yi and blinked. She said, Manager Li, in the contract we negotiated, there is no such thing as selling myself. Of course. Li Yi nodded and said, Cooperation is cooperation, but this request is too much. We absolutely can't agree to it. We can stop doing business in Liuzhou, but we can't treat marriage lightly. Not necessarily. Lin Wanru looked out the door and said, The Lu family is a relative of the royal family and their influence runs deep. Their silk business is spread all over the Qi kingdom. Not only in the Lu province, but in other places as well. Although the Lin family has accumulated some wealth over the years and is praised by many, their foundation is still shallow. Without the protection of the third prince, they would be like duckweed in the water, willow catkins in the wind, at the mercy of others. Li Yi shook his head and said, Marriage should be the result of two people liking each other. It shouldn't be some kind of exchange of benefits, and it shouldn't be a child's play. In this world, how can everything be perfect, Rui? Lin Wanru smiled and said, In this world, how many couples don't like each other? So what if they like each other? So what if they don't like each other? Isn't it all for life? Don't be so pessimistic. I'm only a few months younger than Sister Rui. Dwayner is already 5 years old now. He was a playmate of our neighbor when he was young. Our child just got engaged last month. She laughed self-deprecatingly and said, If I don't get married soon, no one will want me. The famous Miss Lin will have no one who wants you? Li Yi looked at her and shook his head. If you say that you want to get married, the number of men who want to marry you will probably line up from the Lu province all the way to the capital. Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, Manager Li, are you saying this because you want me to earn more money for the Li family for a few more years? The Lin and the Li are a family. Saying this makes us seem distant. Li Yi shook his head and said, Fate is a strange thing. Sometimes it happens just like that. Wanru, you are in the prime of your life now. Wait for another year or two, it won't be a problem. You make it sound nice. Lin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said, If you don't get married while there are still people who want you now, will you marry me in another 2 years if you really can't get married? After she said this, the two of them stopped talking. The atmosphere was a little awkward. You know, there are already 4 of us in my family now. It's a mess usually. Li Yi was the first to break the silence. He lowered his head and sighed. Lin Wanru couldn't help but laugh. She waved her hand and said, I'm just joking. Don't worry, I won't marry you. Her eyes were originally clear and bright, but at a certain moment, they seemed to have lost their luster. The family is already messy enough. It doesn't matter if you're one more. Li Yi raised his head and said, "No one wants you anyway. Why don't you think about it when the time comes?" Outside the courtyard, Lin Yong and Fong were sitting on a big tree. Looking at Li Yi, who was being chased and beaten in the courtyard, Fong patted Lin Yong's shoulder and said, "See, it's none of your business. Why were you in such a hurry just now?" Lin Yong nodded guiltily and said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Learn more in the future." Fong lectured him seriously and jumped down from the tree. Lin Yong stared blankly for a moment, then glanced downwards and instantly felt dizzy. He hugged the tree trunk and shouted, "Let me down, I'm afraid of heights." To Li Yi, the business in Liuzhou was dispensable. Even the business in the entire Qi kingdom did not mean much to him. The Li family's business was spread across all the prefectures in the Qi kingdom. He also had the tax revenue from Xuzhou and Rui City. The money he earned was enough. Not only was it enough, but it could also support Yang Liuqing in his rebellion. It was more than enough. He did not have any big ambitions, such as becoming the richest man in the world. If that was the only ambition he had, it was very likely that he had already achieved it. But since he was going to stay in Liuzhou for a while and had nothing to do, he would do some things while he was at it. If others wanted to fight for something, he did not mind playing along. The business expansion in Liuzhou was still in the preliminary stage, so there would not be any obstacles for the time being. Su Zheng's plan to unify the holy religion had encountered a big obstacle. Before Liuzhou, they had unified more than 10 prefectures and did not encounter too many obstacles. Perhaps this finally alerted the other party. The next few prefectures that Su Zhang brought people to could no longer be contacted. The headquarters of the holy religion was in the capital of the Qi kingdom. There were branches in most of the prefectures and prefectures in the Qi kingdom. These branches were managed by the elites of the holy religion. On normal days, they had one-way contact with the followers. When Su Zhang and the others went there, they did not contact these people. As a result, they could not get the list of followers. All their actions could only be put on hold. The Qi kingdom was much larger than the Wu kingdom and the Jing kingdom. It had nearly 100 prefectures and prefectures. They had only unified a dozen or so prefectures. After the other party was on guard, every step became extremely difficult. It would take a long time to unify one prefecture and one prefecture. Li Yi thought for a while, then borrowed Wanru's study room and began to write a letter. He wrote a few words on the envelope. To Su Tian. These days, Lin Wanru and Lin Yong brought them around. Li Duan liked to play. The main reason was that he didn't need to practice when he played. Moreover, he knew that when he went back this time, he would have to go to school with others. There wouldn't be many free and unfettered days. Old Fong was alone on this trip, but he wasn't when he was out having fun. His relationship with Lin Yong progressed rapidly. He often saw Lin Yong asking him for advice with a sincere face. It seemed that ever since he was hung on the tree by Fong, the two of them often got together, and no one knew what they talked about. Wanru was no longer considered an outsider in the Li family. Before Zuamo and Ruoqing came into the family, she got along very well with Rui and Rui. She was one of Mississippi Lu's few friends. The friendship between the two had been forged several years ago. The last time they were in the capital, she even taught Rui how to read poetry. It seemed that from then on, Mississippi Lu only started to take the initiative to learn. Liuzhou was not big. They would occasionally go out for a walk. In half a month, they had visited all the places, and there was no good place to go. Once people stopped, they would always want to find something to do. But this place was different from the Jing kingdom. There weren't so many opponents who took the initiative to make trouble. It was also different from the Wu kingdom. They couldn't casually rebel, and the days gradually began to become boring. Fortunately, there was Lin Yong to talk to him often. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he always felt that after hanging out with Fong for a period of time, Lin Yong began to talk more. And as he chatted, the topic would always turn to Lin Wanru. Our miss likes to eat sweet things since she was young. When she was young, she ate bad teeth. Later, she slowly changed. But she usually likes to eat some pastries. Lin Yong almost watched her grow up. Naturally, He knew her character and preferences very well. Also, Miss has been competitive and capable since she was young. Otherwise, Old Master wouldn't have handed the Lin family over to her. Lin Yong recalled the past and sighed. He said, actually, during that period of time, Miss didn't have it easy. The family didn't like her, and there were a lot of rumors and slanders outside. Miss had to bear all of it alone. After you came, Li brothers, everything changed. Lin Yong's face revealed a happy expression. He said, ever since you helped her deal with the second master, everyone in the family has been obedient to her. These few years, there hasn't been any more trouble. It's all thanks to you, Li brothers. It's all because of her own tricks. Li Yi shook his head. Among all the women he knew, the most competitive was probably Rui. But in fact, Emingzu and Wanru were the same kind of people as her. It was just that they focused on different areas. Rui was good at martial arts, while Emingzu was good at governing the country. Sometimes, even Li Yi himself had to admire Wanru's business methods. Li Yi looked at Lin Yong and asked, has she been so powerful since she was young? That's not all. Lin Yong thought for a while and shook his head. He said, don't be fooled by Mrs. Ability. In fact, she was still wetting the bed when she was 5 years old. Seeing Lin Wanru coming out of the inner courtyard, Lin Yong hurriedly shut up. Seeing that his gaze and expression were not right, Lin Wanru frowned slightly. She walked over and asked, what are you talking about? He's talking about how good you've been at doing business these few years. Li Yi gave her a thumbs up and said, to be honest, I really admire you when it comes to doing business. Since you said that, I'll take it that you're mocking me. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, at best, I'm just a small steward under Manager Li. When it comes to doing business, how can I be better than you? Li Yi shook his head and said, I only know a little more than others in certain aspects. In fact, I don't know much about doing business. There are many things that I still need to ask you. He picked up the teacup and put it down again. He said, right, I happen to have something to ask you. Lin Wanru sat opposite him and asked, what is it? Li Yi thought for a moment and asked, did you really still wet the bed when you were 5 years old? Hearing this, Lin Wanru was startled, and Lin Yong's expression changed greatly. Lin Wanru took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling a few times. She almost crushed her teeth and squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth. Lin Yong! Judging from the speed at which Lin Yong escaped, he should have been sparring with Fong recently. His skills were clearly much better than before. Seeing that her face was already red, Li Yi hurriedly said, it's nothing. Lin Yong just mentioned it in passing. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but actually, when I was young. She probed, when you were 5 years old, you still wet the bed? Looking at Miss Lin's expectant gaze, Li Yi shook his head and said, no, I stopped wetting the bed when I was 1 year old. When Lu Luo stepped into the courtyard, he saw such a scene. The legendary woman of the Lin family, who had always been indifferent to men, was blushing as she stretched out her hand to hit another man. Of course, anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was a hit, in a flirtatious manner. He had come here many times under the guise of discussing business, but Lin Wanru had never treated him like this. With just one look, he felt a strong sense of jealousy towards that young man. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. With a smile on his face, he stepped forward and said, Wanru, have you thought about the matter I mentioned last time? Lin Wanru glanced at Li Yi, who was beside her. Chapter 11:16. The Lin family of Feng Prefecture was only a new family in the Qi Kingdom. The so-called new clans were naturally different from the Lu clan, which had been around for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. In terms of prestige, wealth and influence, the Lu clan, which had been around for generations, was far superior to those nouveau riche clans. In their eyes, the Lin family and the Qian family, which had been in the limelight for the past few years, were all nouveau riches. The wealth that they had accumulated in a short period of time might be comparable to that of a big family like the Lu family. However, their foundation was shallow, to the point that they had no foundation at all. If the Lin family and the Qian family were not backed by the third prince and the Lu family was also one of the third prince's supporters, he would not have been so polite to them. At least, in the territory of Lu Prefecture, the Lu family did not have to be polite to anyone. He had put down his pride and visited the Lin family several times with great sincerity. He had already given the Lin family enough face. However, what Lin Wanru did just now was rubbing his face on the ground. If the head of the wealthy Lin family was only a lowly steward, who else in the world could be called a shopkeeper? This was an insult to him. Lu Luo stopped smiling and said calmly, "Miss Lin, the Lu family came with sincerity. I hope you won't play this kind of joke on me." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "I'm not joking. This is really our shopkeeper." "If that's the case, then there's nothing else to talk about." Lu Luo stood up and said this. He turned around and left. Although he did not say much, Li Yi could still feel his strong resentment as he walked out of the door. Li Yi looked at Lin Wanru and said, "It's over. You've offended the local bully. If he holds a grudge and seeks revenge, it will be difficult to do business in Lu Prefecture." "What should we do then?" She sighed and said, "Lu Prefecture is not like Feng Prefecture. We have no one to rely on here. We can't win against them. What's there to be afraid of? Lu Zhou isn't even surnamed Lu. Do you think they'll chase you out?" Although Lu Zhou's surname isn't Lu, it isn't Lin either. Li Yi thought about it carefully and said, "That's not necessarily true. If you carefully consider what happened last time, it might be possible to let it have the surname Lin." Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, "What happened last time?" Mississippi Lu walked over from behind and stopped beside him. She asked, "What happened last time?" "Last time. What happened last time?" Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "It doesn't matter what happened last time. Anyway, don't worry about the Lu family. We have a strong foundation in Lu Zhou. We're not any worse than them. Don't worry." Fortunately, the branch of holy religion in Lu Zhou was already under his command. To put it in a small way, he had a certain foundation in the masses. To put it in a big way, he had a certain foundation in rebellion. He was not even afraid of Lu Zhou's government. Why would he be afraid of a mere Lu family? The Lu family. A young man looked at Lu Luo and asked. She refused. Lu Luo's face was gloomy. He nodded and said, "The Lu family is a small temple. It can't accommodate a big Buddha like the Lin family. There are so many women in the world. Why did you choose Lin Wanru?" The young man frowned and said, "Although she's not young anymore, she's still the master of the Lin family. How can she be your concubine? Or is it the Lin family that you want?" He looked at Lu Luo with a calm expression, but it made Lu Luo break out in a cold sweat. Although the Lin family didn't have much of a foundation, in terms of wealth, several Lu family couldn't compare. If he really won over Lin Wanru and the Lin family, his status in the Lu family would definitely rise. At that time, the one who would be the most unhappy would be his brother. He hurriedly explained, "I'm not doing this for the good of the family. Even if we can't get the Lin family, as long as we can subdue that woman, we won't have to worry about the family's prosperity. Brother, do you also want the Lu family to hide in this small Lu Zhou?" The young man looked at him vaguely and said, "Since she doesn't want to give face to the Lu family, we don't have to show her any mercy. As the saying goes, a powerful dragon cannot crush a snake in its own territory." This saying was very reasonable. After offending the Lu family, the supply to Lu Zhou was cut off the next day. This time, they came to Lu Zhou because the textile industry in Lu Zhou was developed. It was the largest producer of silk in the Qi kingdom. If they built a clothing store here, they could save a lot of money and unnecessary expenses. In this way, they had to rely on the supply from Lu Zhou. This was a win-win situation for both parties. Before Li Yi and the others arrived in Lu Zhou, countless merchants had come to them to seek cooperation. They were almost crying and begging to hitch a ride on the Lin family's wagon. In the past few days, those merchants who had reached an agreement with each other sent their stewards over. They used various reasons for the lack of supply to terminate the cooperation. At first, considering that the store was still in the construction stage and the details had not been decided, they did not sign a contract. These merchants regretted their decision at the same time. Several stewards went to many other merchants and received the same answer. The Lu family wanted to use this method to cut off their supply. This was a childish but effective method. No one was willing to sell raw materials to them. Naturally, the store could not continue to operate. One of the stewards said anxiously, "Shopkeeper, please think of a way." We have already invested so much in Lu Zhou. If this happens, all the money from before will be wasted. Another shopkeeper complained. Merchants should keep their word. How can they go back on their word? This is clearly a trap for us. Shopkeeper, please make a decision. Lin Wanru looked at the anxious stewards and looked at Li Yi. She said, Shopkeeper, you make the decision. Li Yi realized that the business world's Hua Mulan, Lin Wanru, Miss Lin's recent actions did not match her title at all. Every day, she would drink tea and chat with Rui and the others. She would even ask Rui to teach her a few self-defense moves. After hearing that Rui and the others had all learned the youthful technique, she completely ignored the business. The arrangements and deployment of the business in Liuzhou fell on his shoulders. She kept saying that she was a steward, but how was she a steward? She was clearly the fifth madam of the Li family, however. The fifth madam's attitude was the fifth madam's attitude. After all, he had been a hands-off shopkeeper for 5 years. He had to be more tolerant of this willful steward. If she decided to wash her hands of the job and quit, where could he find such a good fifth steward? Li Yi looked at Su Zhang, who was standing at the side, and said, Envoy Su, sorry to trouble you. The Lu family. Lu Luo sat in the hall with a sneer on his face. The Lin family's business was very big. It had spread all over the Qi kingdom. It was much bigger than the Lu family's business. However, it should not be forgotten that this was Liuzhou, the Lu family's Liuzhou. In Liuzhou, even the tiger had to lie down and the dragon had to lie down. Lin Wanru did not give him any face. She did not give the Lu family any face. In Liuzhou, they would not be able to do anything. The Wu family. The Wu family's silk business in Liuzhou was not the best, but it could be ranked in the top 5. At this moment, the master of the Wu family was sending the few people out of the mansion respectfully. He bowed to the person at the front and said, Sir Envoy, please be rest assured. I will keep the people under control. They will not cause trouble for you. Su Zhang nodded with a cold expression on his face. The few shopkeepers of the Lin family followed behind. Each of them looked as if they had seen a ghost. Yesterday, just yesterday, they stood at the door of the Wu family. They did not even enter the main door. It had only been a day, but the master of the Wu family saw them as if he had seen his ancestor. To be more precise, he saw Envoy Su. It was not just the Wu family. They had gone to a few other families. The attitude of those family heads was exactly the same as the master of the Wu family. They easily signed a contract with the other party. Those stingy cheapskates all wanted to give them as much as they could this time. They could not refuse. The people of Liuzhou were terrifyingly simple. Chapter 11:17. The Wu family, the Chen family, and the Wei family, have they lost their minds? In the Lu residence, Lu Luo, who had just received the news, had a dark expression on his face. He was pacing in the hall and growling in a low voice. This time, he had mobilized the Lu family's resources and joined forces with the other major clans in Luzhou to cut off the Lin family's supply of goods, completely blocking the Lin family's escape route. The other party's shop and workshop in Luzhou had already been built. If there was no supply of goods, all the initial investment would be for naught. At this time, if he used another identity to negotiate with Lin Wanru, the result would be completely different from before. However, he did not expect that after a few days of gloating, the blockade he had formed with the major clans in Luzhou to seal off the Lin family would be torn open. The Wu family, the Chen family, and the Wei family were not as rich and powerful as the Lu family. But when they joined forces, the Lu family could not touch them easily. The problem was that they had previously promised him that they would unite to fight against the Lin family, who was an outsider. However, at the critical moment, they went back on their word, causing the Lu family to waste a lot of resources. Could it be that these clans were spies planted by the Lin family in Luzhou? Lu Luo asked with a dark expression. What did they say? One of the servants hesitated for a moment before saying, They said that they would be bastards if they didn't earn money. Thank you, young master, for giving them the opportunity to cooperate with the Lin family. Lu Luo almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He said furiously, Bastards, bastards, they've been fooling me from the beginning. Shut up. A middle-aged man walked in from outside the door and glanced at Lu Luo. The latter immediately shut his mouth. He could be arrogant in front of outsiders, but he did not dare to lose his composure in front of his father, the current master of the Lu family. I handed over the Lu family's business to you. Look at what you've done these days. The middle-aged man looked at him coldly and said, the Lin family could not have come this far without the support of the third prince. If you go against the Lin family, you are going against the third prince. Are you going to take the blame or the Lu family? Father, Lu Luo opened his mouth but did not say anything. The middle-aged man paused for a moment before continuing. However, even though the third prince thinks highly of the Lin family, our Lu family is not one to be trifled with. If we were to lose like this, I'm afraid that the third prince will look down on us. Lu Luo was delighted to hear that and immediately said, Father, you are right. The Lu family is a century-old family. How can we lose to the Lin family? Why don't we? Before he could finish, the middle-aged man waved his hand and said, Put away your crooked tricks. The business world is like a battlefield. Even if you want to win, you have to win fair and square. I want to see if the legend of the Lin family is really that capable, or if the rumors are exaggerated. Li felt that the rumors about the Lin family's favored daughter were exaggerated. She did not care about anything these days. She was more familiar with Rui and the others than he was. Rui taught her the youth-retaining technique that he had tricked from old Taoist Yuan. She shared her beauty and skincare tips with them. She was no different from those rich ladies in the capital city who had nothing to do. She did not look like a businesswoman at all. In the end, he had to do all the work himself. In the Li family, such a lazy steward would have long been fired and left to starve to death. This is so infuriating. Li Yi sat in the yard and browsed through the accounts. Lin Wanru's maid, Xiaofan, came in and sat opposite him. She had her hair tied into two buns and looked sullen. Her angry look made her look a little cute. What's wrong? Li Yi asked casually. It's those people. The little girl put her hands on her hips, and the anger on her face had not dissipated. She said, We opened a clothing store, and they also opened a clothing store. They chose to open it before we opened our store, and they even cut the price by 10%. They are clearly trying to steal our business. Xiaofan had been with Lin Wanru since she was a child. She followed her everywhere and traveled with her. She was very familiar with some things in the business world. However, her mentality and character were still not used to the business world. A business war was a war without gunpowder. A large-scale business war, in terms of influence and power, was not inferior to a war. The difference was that a war was a real one. After the war, there would be a lot of corpses. After a business war, there would often be no bones left. If they do this, when we open in 2 days, there will be no customers. The little girl wiped her tears. She had been following the business expansion in Liuzhou from beginning to end. She had worked so hard for so long, but in the end, the peaches were taken by others. She felt so wrong that she was about to cry. Li Yi had a headache when he saw the girl cry. He hurriedly said, Don't cry, don't cry. It's just stealing customers. I will teach you a trick that can definitely steal all our customers. It's true. Xiaofan rubbed her eyes and looked at him with surprise. She trusted young Master Li very much. Sometimes, she even trusted him more than she trusted her own Mississippi. Because when her miss encountered something she could not decide, she would also listen to Li. Don't worry about it. Li Yi put down the account book and said, Let's talk about something else first. Xiaofan, how old were you with your miss? Xiaofan thought for a moment and said, 9 years old. How old was your miss at that time? I think, 14 years old. Then, when your miss was 14 years old, did she still wet the bed? From the beginning, Li Yi saw Lin Wanru standing in the distance and looking at them from time to time. At a certain moment she finally came over and asked, You and Xiao, what were you talking about just now? Li Yi said helplessly, You didn't teach her how to deal with the Lu family, so I had to teach her myself. Lin Wanru still looked a little doubtful and asked, That's all? That's all. Li Yi looked at her and said in surprise, Xiao was about to cry because of the Lu family's means. I just taught her how to deal with it. What else could I say besides that? I can't say that you still wet the bed occasionally after you were 10 years old, can I? Lin Wanru was stunned, and then her face began to blush and blush. Generally, people would not wet the bed after they were 1 or 2 years old, but before she was 14 years old, this kind of shameful thing would happen occasionally. This embarrassment lasted until she was 14 years old and then disappeared completely. But after she was 5 years old, the only one who knew about this matter, besides her, was Xiaofan, who slept with her at that time. How long had it been? The two closest people around her had actually betrayed her at the same time. Xiaofan, she clenched her teeth and turned to the inner courtyard. A puzzled look appeared on Li Yi's face. Did he say anything wrong just now? What's the point of venting your anger on Xiaofan? If you have the ability, come at me. In the Lu family, Lu Luo held a piece of paper in his hand and asked uncertainly, do they really give this kind of thing all over the street? The servant nodded and said, yes, young master. The shopkeeper and the shop assistant of their shop have a thick stack of it in their hands. They give it to everyone they see. The one in my hand was forced to me by them. It is said that they also recruited people and gave them 10 copper coins a day. Lu Luo looked at the paper in his hand and said with a smile, they cut the price by 10% on the first day, by 20% on the second day, by 30% on the third and fourth day. Half a month later, they actually cut the price by 90%. He put the paper on the table and said mockingly, they cut the price by 10%. Why didn't they give it away for free? The Lu family gave 10% of the profit, so the number of customers in the shop had multiplied over the past few days. They had the idea of small profits but quick turnover. However, small profits but quick turnover did not mean that the lower the price the better. 10% of the price was far lower than the cost price. The more they sold, the more they would lose. If the people of Luzhou bought their goods on the last 2 days, even if the Lin family was wealthy and did not care about the loss of Luzhou, they would still become a joke in the business world. What the proud daughter of the Lin family, the Hua Mulan of the business world. It turned out that it was all just a rumor. In half a month, get someone to buy a lot of the Lin family's goods. Lu Luo twitched the corner of his mouth and said, they just opened for business and they already gave us such a big gift. They are too kind. Chapter 11:18. There were a few new clothing stores in Liuzhou. Almost everyone inside and outside the city knew about it. The news spread far and wide. It was no less than half a year ago when the provincial governor of Liuzhou was arrested for corruption, or when a group of bandits who had been harming the people for more than a decade were all beheaded by the government. Within a day, everyone knew about it. It was not entirely because the newly opened stores were cutting prices so much that it was unprecedented. The main reason was that no one had seen the overwhelming publicity on the streets and alleys of the city. Almost everyone in Liuzhou had a copy of the leaflet that was the size of a palm. There was more than one. After reading through the leaflet, the literate people knew that this was a big discount for the opening of the clothing store. After half a month, they could buy ready-made clothes and cloth at a low price of 10%. They had seen shops reduce prices for promotion, but they had never seen such a ruthless reduction. What was the difference between 10% of the price and giving it away for free? Those who could not read took the leaflet and asked others. They understood the general meaning. After asking, they were puzzled and in disbelief. A few days ago, the Lu family had cut prices by 10%. Many people already thought that they were taking advantage of the situation. Several stores were crowded with customers. The prices of these newly opened shops had been reduced to only 10%. Compared to the preferential treatment offered by the Lu family, the difference was nearly 10 times. It seemed to be somewhat inadequate. They did not have to worry that the other party would cheat them. The words on the leaflet were very clear. If they wanted to play tricks like raising prices first and then lowering prices, the government would not let them go. On the street, a woman took the leaflet from a shop assistant. After looking at it, she said in surprise, in a few days, their clothes will be so cheap. If it's true, we have to buy a few more. The man next to her said in surprise, didn't you just buy a few days ago? Why are you still buying? The woman rolled her eyes and said, those are from the Lu family. How can the Lu family's things compare to the Lin family's? I've been looking forward to their store opening in Liuzhou for a long time. The prices are so cheap. It would be a waste not to buy them. The man hesitated for a moment and asked, you bought so many clothes. Can you wear them all? I'm a woman. What's wrong with a woman buying a few beautiful clothes? The woman looked at him and said with dissatisfaction, besides, no matter how many clothes I buy, aren't they all for you to see? What about me? You're a scholar, but you don't even know how to calculate. Buying a piece of clothing from the Liu family is equivalent to buying 2 or 10 pieces of clothing from the Lin family. But it's not even as beautiful as the Lin family. If I buy it this time, I won't have to buy it again this year. Do the math, how much money can you save? What about me? Do you not love me anymore? No. You didn't even buy me clothes. You really don't love me anymore. Did you fall in love with some vixen? Then let's buy it, the man sighed. The Lin family, the Lin family, the Lin family's underwear, the Lin family's perfume and soap, the Lin family's ready-made clothes, and the money he earned from selling his paintings were all given to the Lin family. Fortunately, although his wife spent a lot of money, she always kept her word. If she said she wouldn't buy it this year, she wouldn't buy it again this year. However, it seemed that there were only 2 months left this year. Before the Lin family's ready-made clothes shop opened for business, it had already attracted the attention of countless people. Regardless of how many people would patronize it, at least it was the first time in history that a few small shops could cause such a sensation. On the first day of the shop's opening, several shop assistants and shopkeepers were anxiously waiting, but there were only a few customers. Most of the people who came to take a look were asking if the 90% price reduction in half a month was true. Not a single person was really willing to buy. When the Liu family cut the price by 10%, the shop's threshold was almost trampled to pieces. Now that they had the same price as the Liu family, the shop was deserted. Comparing the two, it was really sad. Sir, what are you looking at? Seeing someone come in, a shop assistant hurriedly greeted him. I heard that your shop will reduce the price by 90% in half a month? The man looked at the shop assistant and asked doubtfully, Is it true? Absolutely. The shop assistant smiled and asked, Sir, do you want to look at clothes? What do you want to look at? The man glared at him and said, Do you think I'm stupid to spend the money of 9 clothes to buy one? Why don't I come back in half a month? Sir, take care. Watching the customer leave, the shop assistant's face showed a polite but not awkward smile. It's over. He walked in front of a manager and said, If they all come back in half a month, we will lose a lot. Although the manager was also extremely nervous, he still comforted him. This is only the first day, you have to believe in miss. The second day. All the clothes in the shop were 20% off. There were more customers entering the shop than yesterday, but still no one was willing to buy. The third day, the fourth day. All the clothes and fabrics were sold at 30% off. There were more customers entering the shop, and a few people were willing to buy, but it was only a small number. Several shops added up only sold a dozen pieces. The Liu family. Haha. Lu Luo couldn't help but laugh. In the past few days, he had been paying attention to the situation of the Lin family's shop, so he was very clear about the situation there. The Liu family's main business was the silk fabric business. He was very clear about the profits. Once the price was cut by more than 50%, it would be a business that would definitely lose money. The more they sold, the more they would lose. What would they earn? Their reputation? He wanted to learn from the Liu family's methods, but he failed. He just had to wait for the Lin family to become a joke in Liuzhou. At that time, he would like to see how that Lin Wanru could be arrogant in front of him. Lu Luo laughed happily, but Xiao was about to cry. What should I do? She anxiously paced around in the yard. This was the fourth day. More and more people entered the shop, but only a few were willing to buy. If this continued, the price would continue to drop, and they would lose money. Li Duan ran over with 2 candied haws in his hands. He handed one to her and said, Sister Xiao, don't worry. This candied haw is for you. Xiao was not in the mood to eat the candied haw, so she returned it to Li Duan. Li Duan couldn't eat too, so he reached out and handed it to her again. Aunt Lin, this is for you. Thank you, Duaner. Lin Wanru didn't refuse. She took the candied haw and gently took a bite. She looked at Xiao and said, Don't worry. You'll know tomorrow. Li Yi knew that there was still someone who understood him. The 60% discount was actually a critical point, and this had been proven in the future. Not everyone had the patience to wait for half a month. The discount price seemed very tempting, but in fact before that, all the goods would be sold out at around 50% off. In fact, it was up to the merchants themselves to decide whether the goods were sold out or not. At that time, the Lin family had quickly opened up the market in Lu province. They used some marketing tactics from time to time. The Lin family ate the meat, while the Lu family and other families could only drink the soup. When they were in Feng province, he had already taught Miss Lin about these tactics. If she hadn't been busy learning how to be beautiful from Rui, she wouldn't have had to do it herself. She could have completely destroyed the Lu family. In comparison, the tactics he taught Xiao this time were very gentle. Two women walked out of a clothing shop in the Lin family. The woman on the left looked back and said, "That fairy dress is so beautiful. I must buy it when it's 50% off." The woman on the right smiled and said, "Great, I like it too. It'll be 50% off in 2 days, so we can buy 2 different sets. We'll come again on that day." "Sure." "That's settled then." The next day, all the goods in the Lin family's clothing shops in Lu province were sold at 40% off. Early in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the two women met again at the entrance of the shop. One of them looked at the other and said, "Didn't we agree to come together the day after tomorrow?" The other woman looked embarrassed. "I'm just here to take a look." The woman was silent for a moment before she asked, "Don't tell me you're going to snatch that fairy dress from me. I saw you looking at it for a long time yesterday." The other woman said unhappily, "What do you mean by yours? It belongs to whoever gets it first." Behind them, the crowd had already blocked the entire street. "Open the door. It's already so late. Open the door." "That's right. This is how you do business." Someone could not help but step forward and knock on the door. "Open the door. Open the door." One of the workers yawned and opened the door a little. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned. The next moment, he closed the door without hesitation. His face was filled with fear as he shouted, "Shopkeeper, something bad has happened. Someone wants to destroy our shop." Chapter 11:19. "Everyone, please line up outside. Don't push, don't push. There are too many customers, please forgive us. The supply is limited. Each person can only buy 5 pieces at a time, 5 pieces at a time." Even though they were greatly understaffed, there were still a few workers maintaining order at the entrance of the clothing stores. Outside each store, there was a long line of customers. Even in the stores on both sides of the same street, the customers lined up together. 2 days ago, when the Lin family's store reduced the price by 30%, many people were still in a wait-and-see state. After all, the price would be reduced by 10% every 2 days, and no one wanted to spend more money for nothing. But today, when the price was reduced to 60%, everyone couldn't sit still. Although after 10 days, they could buy the goods at the original price at 10% lower. The problem was, before that, what if the goods they liked were bought by others? 60% was already an unimaginably low price. If they were one step late, the goods in the store would be sold out, and what was the use of 10% lower price? This led to the prosperity of several stores today. Inside the shop, the smiles on the faces of all the employees and stewards never disappeared. The depression and worry of the past few days were swept away at this moment. If there were as many customers tomorrow as today, they wouldn't even have to wait for the day when the price would be reduced by 50%, and all their goods would be sold out tomorrow. This time Xiao was in the mood to eat candied haws. She held a hawthorn and a fruit assortment in one hand, looked at her miss and said happily, "Miss, you are really clever. How did you know that the customers today couldn't help it?" Only then did she know why her miss asked several stewards to urgently transfer goods to the neighboring states of Lu province a few days ago. She had been with her miss for so many years and had seen many scenes, but it was the first time she saw the scene where the whole city people were frantically buying. Ahem. Li Yi coughed lightly. He was the one who told her this idea. How could it be her miss who was clever? Xiao took a bite of the assortment of candied haws, looked at Li Yi and said, "We are family, Li, don't be so stingy." If Li Yi was stingy, he wouldn't have used such a violent method to open up the market. Although they could still make a lot of money from the price reduction, their ready-made clothes were cheap and of good quality. They were very popular in both the Qi and Jing kingdoms. They were always in short supply and there had never been a time when they couldn't sell. This time, he was only making a name for himself in Liuzhou and giving a portion of the profits to the people. What he gained was long-term development. Later on, they would organize membership events, birthday events, and the like. Then, they would be able to gain a firm foothold in Liuzhou. To be honest, Li Yi did not care much about the business in Lu province or even the Qi kingdom. However, it was different for Xiao and Lin Wanru. He had no choice but to do something since he had nothing to do anyway. However, there were people who cared more about the Lin family's business in Liuzhou than him. Lu Luo had just returned from outside. His face was frighteningly gloomy. He had just gone to the Lin family's shop to take a look. The street was filled with people. As he walked through the crowd, his wallet and the jade pendant on him had been stolen. There were more than 10 people who stopped him and asked if he should queue up for him for 5 taels of silver each time. He thought that the Lin family's ready-made clothes shop would be deserted as usual. It would not be until 10 days later that the people who had been waiting for a long time would rush to buy the clothes at a low price. By then, the Lin family would lose everything they had invested in Liuzhou. However, today was only the 5th day, and things had developed in a direction that he had not expected. There was a long queue outside every Lin family shop. He had lived for more than 20 years and had never seen such a grand scene. Even the biggest temple fair in Liuzhou city was not as grand as this. Although 60% of the price was already very low, with such a large sales volume, it was enough to ensure that they would not lose money. This was like a slap to Lu Luo's face. With the Lin family's interference, unless the Lu family reduced the price from 90% to 70% or 60% in the future, there would not be much effect. More importantly, after this, the Lin family's shops would completely enter the sight of the people of Liuzhou. The first to be affected would be the Lu family's business. A shopkeeper had already reported that the Lu family's shop did not have a single customer today. A servant beside him raised his head and asked, "Young master, what should we do? They are limited to 5 pieces per person. Even if we want to buy, we won't be able to buy much." Lu Luo thought for a moment and said, "Go find more people. In 2 days, when they reduce the price to 40%, we must buy all of their goods before anyone else." "But young master, I think that before they reduce the price to 40%, all of their goods will be sold out." "Then 50% it is." Lu Luo gritted his teeth and said, "This time, the Lu family suffered losses because of them. This time, we must earn back all of it." After the meal, Li Yi took Ruoqing out for a walk. When they came back, they saw more than 10 carriages parked in front of the mansion. Lin Yong was directing them to unload the goods. He first helped Ruoqing back to rest. When he came out again, he walked to the courtyard and sat down. He asked Lin Wanru, who was sitting opposite him, "Have the goods arrived?" Lin Wanru nodded. "Just arrived. Logically speaking, they should have arrived a few days ago. It took me some time to transport the outdated models from the other states. After the influence of the past few years, some of the common people in the Jing Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom had learned to follow the fashion trend. The ready-made clothing stores would also introduce new styles in time. Those outdated styles would be eliminated and lowered to a lower level. Then they would target the low-end market and sell them at a low price. Li Yi thought for a moment and looked at Lin Wanru. He asked, "You're not thinking of canceling the limit of 5 pieces per person, are you?" "Not at all." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "I just feel that 5 pieces is too few. Many customers have objections. Why don't we change it to 500 pieces? Li Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Won't this be too much?" Lin Wanru sighed and said, "If we don't go too far, they will go even more. Don't offend women, especially smart women." Li Yi concluded another life philosophy. It had been a day since the Lin family's shop reduced prices by 50%. Lu Luo looked at a servant with a gloomy face and said, "I told you to get more people to line up. What are you doing?" The servant looked bitter and said, "Young master, you told us to go earlier. I got up before dawn, but who knew that there would be a long line in front of their door?" Lu Luo looked at him and asked expressionlessly, "Are you blaming me for not thinking it through?" "I wouldn't dare." The servant hurriedly shook his head and said respectfully, "Young master, from tomorrow onwards, each person can buy at most 500 pieces. I won't sleep today. After they close tonight, I'll bring some people to guard their door. This time there won't be any problems. If there's a problem this time, don't come to see me again." "Don't worry, young master." The Lin family's ready-made clothing store had been selling at half price for a day. After the craze 2 days ago, the number of customers did not decrease. Instead, it increased. However, the people who got up before dawn the next day to line up realized something. A group of people with straw mats and quilts wrapped in them were sitting in front of the big stores. It seemed that they had been here since last night. This scene naturally made them speechless. It was already very cold at night in Lu province. To actually line up since last night just to buy a few pieces of clothing, this was more than crazy. It was a little crazy. Even the shop assistant who opened the store in the morning was shocked. After the store opened, those people threw the straw mats and quilts aside and swaggered into the store. Because the store space was limited, only about 10 people could enter at a time. The shop assistant smiled and asked, "Sir, please take a look first. Call me if you like anything." The first man who entered the store waved his hand and said, "I'll take all of these in your store." At the same time, the same situation happened in all the big stores of the Lin family. Chapter 11:20. "Sir, how many did you say just now?" The shop assistant was startled and asked with some uncertainty. 500. The man frowned and said, "I want all of these in your shop. If it's not enough, I'll make up for it." The shop assistant looked troubled and asked, "Sir, if you want to buy 500 pieces, what about the customers behind you? What does it have to do with me?" The man looked at him with dissatisfaction and said angrily, "Hurry up, my time is precious." "Sir, cut the crap. Are you selling or not?" "Yes." A steward came over and nodded heavily. He ordered the people behind him, "Wrap them all up." After that, he pointed to another person, "You go and urgently transfer a batch of goods from the warehouse." The clothes in the shop were quickly packed and valued. Another shop assistant moved the new goods from the warehouse and hung them up again. A shop assistant walked to the second person and said, "Sir, please take a look first." "No need." The man waved his hand and said, "Pack them all up and make up for 500 pieces." The steward hesitated for a moment and said, "Sir, if you pack them all up, we won't have any stock in the shop. That's none of my business." The man shook his head and said, "Since you're open for business and you've set the rules, I want 500 pieces. Not one more, not one less. Just tell me if you're selling or not." The steward looked at him and thought for a moment. He nodded and said, "Yes." Some customers behind them were dissatisfied. "What's wrong with you? You bought all of them. What should we do?" "Yes, you're not following the rules. Shopkeeper, you can't sell them to him." Hearing the objections of the customers behind them, a few strong men stepped forward and asked, "Who said we're unreasonable just now?" As the few of them stepped out, a terrifying aura pressed down on them. These people were obviously in cahoots. The few people who spoke just now immediately shut their mouths. The man turned around and said, "What are you waiting for? Pack them up." Outside the shop, the people who were still waiting in line were already in an uproar. What are they doing inside? Why haven't they come out after so long? Those inside, hurry up. There are so many people waiting outside. The crowd was in an uproar for a long time before the manager came out again and said apologetically, "I'm really sorry, everyone. All the stock in this store, including a batch of goods that were urgently transferred from the neighboring province, have been bought by the previous customers." A shop assistant came out and placed a sign that read, "Sold out," at the entrance of the hall. There was a moment of silence in the crowd, followed by a monstrous uproar. "What is this? We came here before dawn to line up, and now you're telling me there's no stock." The shelves were full just now. There were only a few people in front, but they've all been bought out. If it was in a big city like the capital or Qing'an prefecture, people with a little bit of status would be laughed at if they went out wearing such outdated clothes. Those goods used to be sold at 20% or 30% off, but now they could be sold at 50% off. They had to thank the Lu family for dumping them all at once. "This time, I have to thank the Lin family." Lu Luo had a victorious smile on his face. Although the development of things had deviated from what he had imagined, he still felt some sense of achievement in his heart to be able to make the Lin family suffer such a hidden loss. The head of the Lu family walked in from outside. Lu Luo smiled. "Father." "Don't call me father." The middle-aged man looked at him with a sullen face. The reputation and credibility that the Lu family has accumulated for hundreds of years were almost destroyed in your hands. "This is all because of you." The smile on Lu Luo's face froze. "What did I do?" "Tomorrow, reduce the price of those goods you robbed by 20% and sell them cheaply. This way, we can still save some of the reputation of the Lu family." The head of the Lu family looked at him with disappointment on his face. He waved his hand and said, "From today on, you don't have to worry about the business of the Lu family anymore." Lu Luo was shocked and anxious. "Father, why?" The head of the Lu family shook his head. "You are not suitable to do business. The one in the Lin family is much more powerful than you and I can imagine. No wonder the third prince is so protective of the Lin family." This time, he even personally sent a letter to the provincial governor, asking him to take care of the business of the Lin family in Lu province. The third prince personally wrote a letter? After a while, Lu Luo's face turned pale and he slumped on the chair. The Lin family, Lin Wanru. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. After a while, he stood up slowly and said in a hoarse voice, "Come. Brother Feng, when are you free? Teach me a few moves." In a shop, Lin Yong sat next to Feng. After thinking for a long time, he finally spoke. On the surface, the Lu family didn't seem to be doing anything. However, in the past few days, there had been people coming to the shop to make trouble. It was probably their last resort. He knew that he had some skills. However, after interacting with Feng recently, he deeply realized how big the gap between them was. Before Feng could answer, the shop suddenly became quiet. Lin Yong turned around and saw several people walking in. The person in the lead was an extremely tall and muscular man. He and old Feng were already tall and muscular enough, but this person was actually a head taller than the two of them, and a size more muscular. If they were called big men, then this man could only be described as a giant. "Who is in charge here?" the giant man asked loudly as soon as he entered the shop. His voice was rough. Feng stepped forward and walked up to him saying, "I am." Feng was very tall, but standing next to the giant man, he looked like a little bird. Of course he was the bird. The giant man looked down at him and said, "You should pay the shelter fee for this month." Feng looked at him and asked, "Shelter fee?" "Yes." The giant man continued to look down at him and said, "All the shops on this street have to pay the shelter fee every month if they want to operate safely. This is the rule. Didn't you ask about it when you opened the shop?" Feng looked up at him, thought for a moment, and asked, "What if we don't pay?" "Don't pay?" The giant man sneered, grabbed his collar, and slapped the shelf next to him. The shelf suddenly shook. The giant man looked at him and said in a cold tone, "Do you know that a person like you I alone can?" "Pa!" Feng also slapped the shelf. The shelf didn't shake much, but when he took his hand away, there was a handprint on the shelf. He looked up at the giant man and asked, "What can a person like me do?" Looking at the deep handprint on the shelf, the muscles on the giant man's face visibly twitched. "Big brother, which gang do you work in?" He let go of Feng's collar, gently helped him smooth the wrinkles on his clothes, and said with a smile, "An expert like you can beat 10 of me." You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.